What is up, everyone? What is up? We are in the Homelab, and I got a DEF CON lab coat. This was a total impulse buy. I've been wanting this for a while, ever since I saw Kernel Dump had one, so I managed to find one myself. What's up, Hans? How's it going? So... One second. Let me find a charger for my phone, because I've been not really charging it, because I've been working on the Homelab trying to get the LLM server set up, which, by the way, it's mostly set up. It was a pain in the ass. I will not lie. There was quite a few configurations I had to do, so physically it wasn't too hard to build. I mean, it's a little bit tight in there because you have a regular ATX motherboard with the new 5060 Ti. Then I installed the 5050 in the stream PC over here, which, by the way, does seem to be more efficient on the NVENC encoders. I haven't moved over to trying to use AV1. We're going to look up the instructions for that so I can set up a to-do list. But I've noticed my utilization has gone down from like 74%, well, 74 to 80%, to about 58 to 63. Is about the average where I'm getting right now. But yeah, I put the 5050 in here because the 3050 is going into the LLM server. Now, the reason why I didn't put the 5050 in there is the difference in performance was going to be rather negligible. That was the honest truth, because it's more the VRAM that was the issue. So we have the 3050 and the 5060 Ti. The interesting thing was, in order to get it working on the server, well, one, I did a BIOS update. You should do that anyway. I found out some caveats with the CPU I'm using, because I'm using a Ryzen 5 3400G, just because I already had it. I'm going to eventually upgrade that to a Ryzen 5500, because of a few issues that I found. One, it looks like the Ryzen 5 3400G at most likes 2933 megahertz, 2933 megahertz memory. So the 3200 megahertz kit that I had to downclock it and adjust the timings manually rather than use the XMP profile. I was getting issues and instability, and it was crashing. Aside from that, the CPU itself is only using PCI Express 3.0 rather than 4.0, so there's going to be some bandwidth limitations to the two GPUs, so that's a simple upgrade without having to replace the motherboard. And I get a couple cores, so I go from 4 cores, 8 threads to 6 cores, 12 threads, so that's great. Recently bought secondhand PS3 controllers. They work without issues on Linux. Even wireless works perfectly fine on Linux. Yeah, controllers have been working perfectly fine on Linux for many years. I've been using an Xbox 360 wired controller for many years. I use wired because I just don't want to deal with changing batteries. But I have many people that have told me the wireless controllers work perfectly well. I heard the PS3, PS4, and such controllers work as well, though I'm more comfortable with the Xbox controller when I do have to use them. But I only really use them when I'm using a vehicle in games, as well as Rocket League and stuff like that. But yeah, the LLM server is initially set up. Like, I literally got it to see both GPUs just before the stream. So I took a break, got on here. What was interesting, though, was so I use Ubuntu server, so I'm not using a GUI at all. I don't want to waste resources on that. But what was really interesting was I could see the 3050 on the NVIDIA proprietary drivers, but the 5060 Ti would only work with the new NVIDIA open source drivers. So I had to rip that out, put the open sourced ones on, and now they're both seen. It was really interesting to find that out. I also had to disable Secure Boot to get NVIDIA working. I had to enable above 4G decoding, which wasn't on. There was a few tweaks I had to do on the BIOS and that just to get it to where it now works. I did also run into some constraints with the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus that is running my Stream Daemon. for all the notifications and everything. It's got 1 gigabyte of memory, and I Dockerized the whole thing. And I want to keep it Dockerized. It makes it easier to control everything. And it's only got 1 gig of memory, so I'm running into the limitations there of the Pi, just running 2 Dockers. I'll show you that right now. PS3 controllers on Windows OS is a nightmare to get working. That's interesting. I would have thought they would have worked fine. But yeah, as you can see, we're getting quite a bit into swap. I actually had an error and I had to restart the Docker for it to work. And that's only with 2 Docker containers. It's running Stream Daemon and Star Daemon. So it's doing my Twitch, Kick, and YouTube notifications for when I go live, as well as it's monitoring when I start something on GitHub and posting that to Discord, Matrix, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. And seeing as I plan to have a couple more programs that I want to have Dockerized, that's no bueno. Now, I did think about this. I did have another Raspberry Pi 3B Plus I found laying around in here. I don't know if you all remember this old gag when the M1 series CPUs came out for Apple. Everyone was hyping up, it's ARM, it's revolutionary. And I came out with the MacBerry Pi parody. I need to find that video. It's been so long ago. But yeah, this is a Pi 3B Plus with a PoE header, if you're wondering what that hat is. And this lets me power it over Ethernet. I usually have a lot of my devices with that, because that way I just have to make sure there's an Ethernet cable and anywhere in the house, as long as it's connected to a PoE switch, I can just have it go. But yeah, so MacBerry Pi. So I do have this. This was originally a PIVX node. Not really doing PIVX much anymore, but it was a Pi 4 gigabyte, I noticed. So this is definitely plenty of power to get what we need. Actually, I need to re-image this. It's got a Samsung 64 gigabyte Pro micro SD in there. And there's my stream notifications going off. So I will have to tell everyone else that same thing. What was I looking for? Oh yeah, the SD card reader. Where is the SD card reader? Oh, I found another flash drive. Never have too many flash drives. Okay. I know there was... Okay, another flash drive. Wait, is it underneath my keyboard again? Nope. But I did find that prank device I was talking about the other day. I might show this to you guys in a little bit. Yeah. Oh, there it is. I knew it was around here somewhere. You're right. It's the chief scientist. Yeah, I got my DEF CON lab coat. It's just a tad tight, but it's perfectly fine. It is a large. I just have broad shoulders. That's the issue. But, yeah, as I was telling everyone, we got the LLM server set up. Not completely. It has a lot of review on... Yeah, we're going to go through that. I have been tinkering so much today. Like, I literally got up this morning, slept in a little bit, chilled out till about 10 o'clock in the morning. So I had a good night's sleep. And then popped a couple of V8 energies as well as my ADHD meds. And then started building the LLM server. So, I don't have it physically here. It's upstairs. I haven't brought it down because eventually what I'm going to do is clear an area underneath the network rack and put it there. But it was really interesting. And I'm going to have the notes for all the tweaks I had to do to get it working. But you can kind of see it from this. It's got a little bit of a glare and reflection. Got addicted to Linux because of you. I know, it is addicting once you start using it. So as you can see, like I said before, I was using the Ryzen 5 3400G, the Noctua cooler, and the Gigabyte motherboard that I already had. All I had to do was add memory, a power supply, a case, and GPUs. So this at least is going right now, but I am going to be dropping a Ryzen 5500 in there later. Because there is some constraints we'll talk about, but as you can see, 5060 Ti brand new is there. The 3050 that was in the stream PC is there, and now there's a 5050 in this box, which will give us AV1 encoding capabilities. I'm actually noticing the encoder on this is a lot more efficient. Before I was reaching, I think I said like 75 to 80%. It was quite a bit doing 4 streams, but now I'm running 4 streams, and it's looked like it's leveled out around like 53% of the encode performance. So we're going to get some AV1 settings eventually if I can figure that out. But as you can see, 3050 down here, 5060 Ti. Now, if you're wondering why I went with the 3050 down here instead of the 5050, the real constraint was the VRAM. They both have 8 gigabytes. The 5060 Ti has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which is, I'd say, the minimum to actually do some decent things these days with some models. If I had the money, I would have gotten a 5090 just to throw in here. I don't think I could justify a 5090 in my own machine. I'm probably looking at a 5070 Ti, but I would put a 5090 in an LLM box because that's got 32 gigabytes of memory, and you can do a lot with that. So this is stage 1 of my AI LLM workflow that we're going to be working on. I'm going to be working on my own text-to-speech server. So we'll keep that local, and then what I'm going to basically do is we'll have text-to-speech set up, then I do my own processing, and it'll go through Discord as a human-in-the-loop interaction, so mods have to verify and approve different things. I'm going to work out specific mods for Twitch viewing, like Vampire, hope you don't mind, you're gonna be one of them because you're usually on Twitch, as well as Kara when she's on. That should be pretty useful and fun to get that set up. So the reason why I'm doing this is a lot of the local LLM stuff that I'm wanting to do is because I'm running into API limitations when I'm doing Google Gemini and stuff. You can only have a certain amount of hits per day and stuff like that, and I want to play around with different models, and it gets expensive if you start using other people's servers. Now, this won't be able to do all the things that I would eventually like to do. I have to build up for that. This is what I'm going to call the poor man's LLM server. Even though you look at it and you're like, wow, you got a 5060 Ti and a 3050 in there and 32 gigs of RAM and all that, that's not a poor man's. In comparison to getting an NVIDIA H100 or better, yeah, or the NVIDIA DGX Spark, which is ideally what I'd like to get, that's like 4K. This is cheap compared to that. So I'm going to have 2 LLMs running on this, and then I'm deciding if I'm going to actually have N8N hosted on that box, or if I'm going to set up another box to do N8N. And that'll be the workflow to figure out all the processing and stuff, because Yitz also wants to do some LLM stuff. But I need a smaller LLM than he does. He needs a bigger one. So I'm thinking the ones that can fit into 8 gigabytes VRAM, like a 7 billion parameter model, should be fine with good quantization. Anyway, that's set up to at least connect in. I'm gonna actually try connecting to that right now. SSH. What did I set that IP to? Oh no. It was DHCP'd. Give me 1 second. What's your fave switches to start my own server VMs for a Homelab? Going to full sale for cybersecurity. So I generally like Ubiquity, but they are expensive. I will be upfront and say that is a question if you want to justify that cost. You can do fine with just starting out in a Homelab. Netgear has some pretty good ones. Netgear managed switches. You need a managed switch. You can use a lot of different vendors out there, but the main thing you're going to need is a managed switch. Again, Ubiquiti, really great. They're really nice for SME, small to medium enterprise, and small office, home office. But again, they are a little bit expensive. If you can get Cisco's secondhand, those are good too. Just know you'll have to deal with the Cisco BS that normally comes around with that. Not necessarily the licensing issues per se, but the learning Cisco iOS. Okay. Why am I not connecting in? My box is being derpy. Well, this is the first time I'm trying to remote in. There we go. For some reason it hung. But I'm going to show you. So as you can see, we are not in my local machine. We are in LLM right now. That's what I called the box. You can see, because when I'm local, I'm on Project NOS, Project New Old School. So if we type NVIDIA SMI, you can see we see two GPUs. We see my 5060 Ti and we see my 3050 in my Ubuntu 2404 server edition. Now, I was thinking about using Debian, but it was one of those, like, going through forums and everything like that, there were definitely some concerns with using Debian, whereas Ubuntu, at least, it's easier to support, and they have newer packages that come out than Debian. Now, there was, as I was saying in the beginning of the stream before, the alerts actually went out, that I did have to do some tweaks. We'll give this about 5 seconds, because I'm waiting for chat to come back in from the ad. Okay, so you're back in from the ads. So I was just showing them. This is on my LLM server. I don't know where the ads began. And we can see right now we're using the NVIDIA 580 drivers on my Linux server. We can see the 5060 Ti and the 3050. Now, if you notice, I'm only using 8 megabytes of VRAM and 1 megabyte of VRAM. How am I getting it that low when my GPU just on the Windows side, and I think even, yeah, even on my Linux box here, so the Windows side I'm using 2 gigabytes of VRAM, but on my Linux box I'm using a little over 1 gigabyte. Now, how am I getting it this low? Simple. We're running it what we call headless. There is no graphical user interface. If you were to walk up to the box, you would see exactly like this. Now, this is the stereotypical people are like, oh, you need to use no terminal to use Linux. Well, we're doing server stuff. When you're doing server stuff, you want as little bloat and junk around your system. So that's why we want it headless, so that way we can free as much VRAM as possible for when we start doing our LLM processes. Now, the interesting thing about getting it to work to this point, so I had to do a few steps, because right when I installed Ubuntu Server, it let you install the NVIDIA drivers. But I couldn't get it working, and it turns out there was a few issues. I had to go into the BIOS, disable secured boot. I also had to enable above 4G decoding, which also enabled resizable bar. Excuse me. And that got it working. That was the main tweaks that I had to do to get it working to see. But then to get it working in Ubuntu Server, because the interesting thing was, when I did that, I could only see the 3050. And when I did a dive into the logs, I noticed something interesting, which is that the 5060 Ti is apparently only supported in the NVIDIA official open source driver. So NVIDIA is now pushing people to use open source drivers. That is a huge win, I have to say, for the long term of Linux, because if you remember, Linus Torvalds gave the famous middle finger to the world in a viral meme that is now in the Linux community for many years to NVIDIA, because they were kind of dicks when it came to the open source movement. They always insisted on having a proprietary driver. But now, my 3050 will only work in a proprietary, well, not only, but it will work with a proprietary driver, but the 5060 Ti and the 5000 series won't work without the open source driver, which means when I upgrade from my 3070 to a 5070 Ti, I'm probably going to have to do the same thing. Most likely, most definitely I am. So that was interesting. So now that we got this set up, throughout the week, I'm going to be tinkering with getting this set up even more. I also have to clear out a space underneath the network rack for this, because the box is just a little bit too big to fit inside the rack. Now, we're also going to be building a second machine, and that's going to be the text-to-speech server. That's going to be using my spare NVIDIA 1660 Super that I had left over, which was the original GPU that I used for the streaming box when I moved it from an NVIDIA Quadro. It was a small Quadro, I can't remember. Because this was originally just a basic workstation for me to tinker with and have Windows working before I actually made it do double duty with streaming, and then was like the 3400G that is now in the LLM server was not enough, and I upgraded this to a 5700X. What AI pipeline are you setting up? So I literally just got the box set up half an hour before I started the stream. So I am planning to use N8N and play around with different ways. It took me, no joke, about 5 hours of tinkering and debugging to figure out why my GPUs didn't show. And after I did that, I felt stupid. What distro am I using? I'm using Pop! OS personally, but I'm using Ubuntu 2404 Server Edition for the LLM box, and then I use Raspberry Pi OS and various other OSs, which we're going to be loading new OS on this because we have to get my Raspberry Pi stuff moved over. Anything better for cybersecurity than Kali or Black Arch? Sorry to change the subject. Parrot OS. If you're daily driving an ethical hacking distribution, Parrot OS is fine. Or if you know what specific tools you want to use any other Linux. But Parrot OS is probably the best of both worlds. They even have a version that you can use without all the ethical hacking tools so that you could use it as a plain old operating system. Kali, I've seen so many people, and it's funny because I've seen so many people come into the Discord server and be like, I'm going to try dailying Kali. And I'm like, you're going to regret that. And sure enough, after a while, they're like, yeah, you were right. Kali's not meant for dailying. It really isn't. If you want to throw it on a flash drive, if you want to throw it in a virtual machine and use it that way, it's fine that way. But if you're trying to install something bare metal and use the operating system consistently, Parrot OS is the one I normally direct people to. You want to get in the dark web? That's not hard. Just get a browser that allows you to access yeah, just get on I was like thinking, is that the deep? No, I was like, before I was finishing, I thought I was like, no, the deep web, and deep web's totally different. Darknet, you just got to get a browser that supports it. You can use Tor browser, you can use Brave browser with the Tor functionality they have built in, and then figure out how to access different onion addresses. You can also use I2P, and Valid is the upcoming network too. That's still mostly in beta though, but you've heard me hype that up for quite a while now. I've been talking about that for 2 years since it first got unveiled by the Cult of the Dead Cow back at DEF CON 31. What's up in Ghana? It's always interesting just how far my community actually is around the world. It's really interesting. I do look at the analytics, and it's absolutely wonderful and amazing that we are able, as big as this world is, it feels so small thanks to the internet. Because I remember growing up, It was, you know, the running joke, oh, I have my girlfriend in Canada. You know, that's been a running joke for many years. And then it became a reality that people would have these long-distance relationships thanks to the internet and build communities thanks to it. I mean, I had a British girlfriend at one point, dating for a couple of years. We found each other over the internet. Things didn't work out, but it is what it is. You're going to use Tails as daily. I know it's you, but I'm just going to, you know, loudly sigh. But yeah, I'm so far happy that I at least got the LLM server concept working. But as I was saying, I did have to, I had to disable Secure Boot to get the NVIDIA drivers to even load. I had to enable above 4G decoding, which also enabled a resizable bar inside of my motherboard. Once I did that, then I was able to see one of the GPUs. Then I had to put the open source drivers on. So there was a little bit of tweaking, and the honest truth was the majority of it wasn't Linux-specific issues. It was issues that I probably would have had to have done in Windows anyway. That's the amazing thing. The really only Linux-specific issue that I was running into was I had to use the open source versions of the NVIDIA drivers directly from NVIDIA because the proprietary ones didn't support the 5060 Ti. That was it. And I definitely am going to be upgrading the CPU on that. I think I said that earlier on. I think that was before the notifications went out. Because it's running a Ryzen 3400G on an AM4 motherboard. And that's working just fine, but as I showed, you know, on the Discord over here, it's a little bit of a tight fit. 5060 Ti and the 3050 is directly below it. I have a Noctua cooler there, but what I'm going to be doing is dropping in a Ryzen 5500 to upgrade the 3400G. The reason being is primarily, when I did some research, the motherboard itself supports PCI Express 4.0 because it's a BM550, if I recall. But the interesting thing was when I looked at the 5060 Ti, it's an 8-lane PCI Express card. So in order to take full advantage, I need to upgrade that to PCI Express 4.0, and it just so happens Micro Center has a 5500 for about 60 or 70 bucks. So, easy drop-in, upgrade, pop off the CPU cooler, pop in the new CPU, turn everything on, ba-bam. So, that'll be great. Sent you a message, hope you... I'm just gonna tell y'all this, I'm not trying to say this to be a dick, don't bother sending me messages on TikTok. You have to understand, my message request queue is flooded. Like, think about this realistically. That's why I tell people I have a Discord server. I have a Matrix server. That is the better place to go in because two things. One, like I said, my message queue is full. Unless I actually know you, my messages aren't pinned to the top, and I selectively respond to few people. And the reason why I do the Discord and the Matrix communities is simple. I would rather have an entire community where we can all learn, grow, and build together than have... And it's not just unique to me. I would rather you have that community than just go to one single source. It's not me being a dick. It's that I understand I'm human. I have a limitation of bandwidth that I can give everyone. And if I have a community, if I'm not around, people can go and help each other. And there's a little over 1,000 people inside the Discord. We also do movie nights. And it's a generally overall good vibes over there. And you can get notifications for whenever I go live on Twitch, Kick, and YouTube. How can you join the group? Links are in bio. And the other way that you can always do that is you can go to discord.chiefgeek3d.com. I have a 302 redirect set up, so it will go right to the Discord invite. And you can also do, matrix-invite.chiefgeek3d.com to get to the Matrix server. Either way, the links are in links.chiefgeek3d.com. Hit the socials tab, and there's all my socials there, including my GitHub. So a lot of the projects that I talk about that I create, you can go find on GitHub. You've been waiting for you to go live ever since you went last live? It's a while. Do you have your OSCP? If so, how long do you think it will take a noob like me? I don't have the OSCP. It's been one of those ones that I'm kind of curious about taking. But the honest truth is, and I always tell people this, don't get certs just to get certs. Certs are a great way to help you get through the door. But the honest thing I will tell you is if you're looking at the OSCP, you're probably looking at penetration testing, right? The question I'm going to ask you is, what experience do you have in cybersecurity before you get into that? Because if cybersecurity is already tough to break into, penetration testing is even harder. There are very, very few pen testers that I know, like I can count on one hand, that have actually gone straight into pen testing. The majority of the ones I know started on blue team, defensive, cybersecurity, and then got over to there. Because, as I tell people, it's like yin and yang. There's a little good and evil and good in the same way that there's a little bit of red teaming and blue team and a little bit of blue teaming and red team. You need to know a little bit of both in order to do both effectively. There's harmony between offense and defense. But with OSCP, the honest truth is from my friends that are studying it, it's taken them a few months of studying, and the test itself, I believe, is about 48 hours. Like 48 hours consecutively. So, you need to make sure that time is allotted. It's not an easy, some people say it's easy, it's mostly enumeration from what I'm told, but still, it's definitely a time dedication, more so than my CISSP, which is the only certification I ever got myself, even though I've been in the career for close to 15 years now, between IT and cyber. So, and the CISSP took me a few months of studying, and I passed it on the first go with the test. The test itself is at most 3 hours. You can do it online or Pearson View Center, but I will always tell you, if at all possible, go to a Pearson View Center, because if you do it remotely and you have a dog or a slightly noisy environment and your dog just happens to bark, you may fail the test. That's how strict they are. We shall steal Chief's bandwidth. I was just going to ask you a recommendation or search to just generally go for. I was hoping to get it for another SOC analyst job. I'm a T1 analyst making... So, the honest truth is... if you're looking at the analyst in a SOC and you're trying to jump up from that, that would be... Now remember, I don't have any certifications besides the CISSP, which I only got last year. And that was more because I was like, it'd be fun to do with a friend. I always urge people to do Homelabbing, document your journey. If you're coding, put it up on GitHub. Put that GitHub in your resume. I have beaten people out that have certifications up the wazoo, that on paper they look way better than me. They have bachelor's degrees, some masters, PhDs, all that. But then I can say, I've done all these things. Here's my, journal of all the different projects I've done. Whether it be a WordPress or, in my case, it's a little bit different social media because I got YouTube and all that stuff. But then I also was able to, link them to my GitHub. And you'd be surprised how few people in cybersecurity have a GitHub and share it. Well, let me put it this way. A lot of people in cybersecurity have a GitHub, but they're usually not sharing it or doing much with it. Although I will also say it this way. If you are in cybersecurity and you've been in for a few years and there's like no activity on your GitHub, not even a basic repo of some scripts you put together or something, doesn't have to be fancy schmancy like some of my Dockerized projects with a CI/CD pipeline or all that, I kind of side-eye people like that. I just want to see that you are like tinkering on your own. You just subbed on the YouTube channel. Nice, thank you. But yeah, as far as the SOC analyst job, I will be honest with you, this market is brutal right now. It is really brutal. I would focus on home labbing, if anything. Not to say that getting a cert doesn't help you, but the OSCP... I'm not saying it's a bad cert. I'm just saying it's, from what I've seen, not one of those certs that a lot of people are looking for. Well, they are in a way, but not really to the same extent. How often do you 3D print? Actually, I haven't been 3D printing much lately. I've been working through a backlog of a whole bunch of other projects. I mean, I've 3D printed the cases for my Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. You know, this, the Trezor case that I had, the phone stand that's over here. I mean, I 3D print quite a bit, but I haven't 3D printed much lately, primarily because I have to do some maintenance on the 3D printers, and I would also like to get some newer 3D printers. I have my eye on that Prusa Core XY. I forget what it's called, but it's a slightly larger Core XY 3D printer. Missed the 3D printer came. It'll come back eventually, but I want to get the Core one. Okay, cool. It'll come back eventually. It will. I have a crap ton of filament I do have to go through. Like, no joke. There's probably 20 kilos of PET G at least that I need to burn through. And we'll eventually get that set up. I've just been wanting to do an overhaul on the 3D printers, the camera, the setup, and everything. But as you've probably noticed, I've been going through a backlog of all the different projects I've been wanting to do, but was kind of burned out, and ADHD medications have finally kicked in and been like, yay, we're gonna do shit! It's wild. I've been looking at that one. I have the MK3S and looked up just upgrading versus buying. I would honestly just buy. Yes, you can upgrade to it, but for how much it's going to cost to upgrade it and the time and all of that, you know, versus taking it apart and rebuilding it versus just building it, I'd rather build it. And then I could have 3 3D printers. But yeah, we'll get that set up. I've been doing a few other tweaks, as you noticed, to the stream. I'm hoping that streamer bot printing is finally getting up. So, like, let me see, hold on. So, like, we have the 3D printer here. Not 3D, the thermal printer here. So, if you sub, if you send channel points, that was a test. It should print out a paper, and that'll help me with my ADHD, also be able to thank people, because things happen so fast sometimes. In theory, it's working, because StreamerBot's kicking it out, but just know, it primarily works with Twitch. It technically has some YouTube stuff, like sponsors, super chat, super sticker, gift membership, Kick, subs, resubs, gifts. It does have a Streamlab as well, integration, which I don't really use, but I have Stream Elements for the tipping. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen, there's a new 302 URL. So if you like the tinkering and all of that stuff, not that you have to, but it'll be appreciated. You can tip, and that goes towards the home lab and tinkering and everything like that. Yes, exactly what I found. I was going to do with my kid. I think you're right. Yeah, it'll be a fun project. I absolutely love doing things with my nieces. I haven't seen them in a few months, but I love tinkering with them. I think the eldest one is old enough now that I can teach her lockpicking and stuff. That'll be fun. She's the one that started teaching herself to code. She was making herself like a little video game or something like that in Unity. I was so proud to see that. I still got to give her t-shirts that I got from Women in Security and Privacy when I was at DEF CON. I love supporting them and turning them into little STEMinists. How can be a professional hacker on the dark web? Well, first, you don't have to type it with dark. Don't call it Drek. Which is kind of funny, because it's close to the word Drek, which is basically just shit in Yiddish. But anyway, the honest truth is, there's nothing really special about being on the dark web, being a hacker on the dark web. It's the same skills. The difference is you're doing it through the dark web, which is what a lot of them end up doing anyway, to anonymize themselves. So there's really not much difference there. It's 6 half a dozen the other, really. But let's remember, hacker in and of itself is not a negative thing. If you are tinkering, if you are trying to get your computers to do whatever, in the way you want, maybe they weren't designed for it, you're hacking. Like, I'm hacking together an LLM server. I'm hacking together some stream notifications with Stream Daemon and all the other things. That's hacking. In the original sense, as was coined in, I think, the 1970s in the MIT Artificial Intelligence Labs. Because MIT apparently had a really fun culture back then. I got him an Elegoo master kit, and he has been crushing that. Nice! I hear good things about the Elegoo stuff. I was actually looking at getting a resin printer myself. I have a Creality large resin printer in my closet. I still got to set up as I say that. Are you getting the Prusa Core L 3D printer? I'll probably get the Prusa Core one. I don't know what specifically I'll get, because the problem is as well, and this has been weighing on my mind, tariffs. It's in the Czech Republic if you buy their 3D printers. Which means that's in the EU, if I recall. Which means, what is that, like a 20-30% tariff that Trump slapped on it? That's no bueno. These tariffs are going to kill a lot of the tech innovation that we can do, because I noticed some of my tech parts are getting more expensive. It's ridiculous. Not trying to get on a political bent, but the unfortunate reality, and I've talked about this very often, is that I know a lot of people like to, go into tech and be like, I go into tech because I want to avoid politics. Here's the reality. If you want to get into cybersecurity, you have to be aware of politics. Politics is unfortunately part of our job, because we have to be aware of every regulation coming down the pipeline and how it can affect our job. In the USA, we have HIPAA, High-Tech, FedRAMP, and a few others. SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley. In the EU, you have GDPR. Now you have NIS2. In South Africa, you have POPIA. In Canada, you have PIPEDA. In China, you have PIPL. You have all these different regulations, not to mention the state patchwork with California with the CCPA. So you don't get the luxury. Oh yeah, the UK Online Safety Act, can't forget that. So you don't have the luxury in cybersecurity to bury your head in the sand. So I'm going to tell anyone that's like, I don't like, being aware of politics, I hate politics. Look, I hate them too. But you got to pay attention to it. Watch the news. Well, you don't have to necessarily watch it, but read the news. Get it from various different sources. Understand what's coming down the pipeline. Even potential legislation that isn't even past committee. Like, I've talked about the Beard Act, and there was another one. I made a YouTube video about it. I've talked about these things. How many certs do you have? Do you think it matters? I have one. And no, it doesn't really matter much. It does in a way, but it doesn't. It's weird. It does, but it doesn't. It's mostly just getting past the HR, word salad to get, past there. But as far as, does it land you the job? Not necessarily. I only have one, and that's the CISSP. The Certified Information Security, Certified Information System Certified Information Systems Security Professional. For some reason, I always forget the ordering of the words. But yeah, that is what I have. The minimum to get that is you have to at least have 5 years in the field of experience, 4 if you have a 4-year degree. I didn't really go to school for college. Oh, that's good timing. Can I go to community college for cybersecurity? I've been hearing there are colleges that have a cybersecurity program. I'm not by any means poo-pooing it or anything like that. I will always encourage, if you can, go to a community college to offset a lot of the costs, because if you go to the big name universities, you're going to be paying for that debt for a decade or more, at least, if you're in the USA. But, yeah, so, you don't necessarily need to go to college to get into cybersecurity either. Now, I will say there's quite a few jobs out there that are requiring you to have a degree, but that's also changing. A lot of the things they're looking at are more experience or at the least certification based. Like I said, I've beat out people that have had bachelor's and master's and degrees to get the jobs that I've had because of the experience and stuff that I'm doing. Do you think it's possible to get rich without breaking the law? Yeah, absolutely. It's done all the time. But it's... I will be honest and say there's a component more of luck than there is of skill. And the unfortunate reality is those who usually come from affluent families of some degree are the ones that generally do it. Like, everyone's like, well, Elon Musk became so successful because, he, did this all by himself and pulled it up. No, his family owned an emerald mine. They owned an emerald mine. They already had money to start with, and he was given more of an advantage to start out with than a lot of us people. Now, if I were to, look at somebody like, I recall Warren Buffett is actually a good example of somebody that actually pulled themselves up by bootstraps. On the Discord, I must be missing something. The channels are still locked. You have to verify yourself. If you read the, so when you land in to the server, there's the welcome wagon. Has all the steps in there. Links, all that. And then you gotta go to the roles channel. All you gotta do, check that box. And while you're at it, you can check the boxes for what other things you want to get notified of. And I have a description for that. Look, I'm pretty good at documenting things. So, yeah. That maybe takes some time. Sometimes it gets janky. This is another reason why I'm wanting to move bots away from Me6, which is the bot I'm using. The thing I notice is that anytime I use hosted bots, like someone else's infrastructure, there can be delays, or sometimes it just doesn't work. And I have to manually go in and adjust it. Which is why I'm recreating my tools to be hosted on my own infrastructure, because one, I can guarantee the performance if there are any issues, and two, it's, well, that kind of goes into the same thing. But, let me see. No, you're verified. If you just came in, was it busted? You botnetting and taking people offline? No. There you go. Yeah, if you look, it looks like you got verified because the penguin's role is what gets attached, and then you should be able to see all the chats below. Chief, permission to yell at someone? I'll allow it. I don't know what it's about, but yeah. Have I ever 3D printed with nylon or ABS? Nylon and ABS, yes. Well, technically not ABS, it's ASA. ASA is preferable over ABS. It's a little bit more stable, slightly easier to print with as well, and it doesn't make as much of a smell as ABS. Either one of those, you will need an enclosure and a heated bed. That's the minimums for it. Enclosure and heated bed. It doesn't have to be a heated enclosure, just an enclosure so that it builds up heat. Now, there is a trick that you can actually set up the G-code that as the printer starts, you can have it pause for like 5 or 10 minutes with the heated bed, so it starts heating up the chamber, and then go from there. But, you know, there's a lot to that. What's up, Fart Buckle? But yeah, if there is an issue with getting access to the Discord, you can, send a ticket in. Yeah, I have a ticketing system there. Actually, just closed it. How long did you dry your nylon? So usually I throw it in a dehumidifier. I forget the temperature. You can look it up. People recommend these temperatures all over in the forums. But I have a dehumidifier I would throw it into, and I would about 2 to 3 hours. Do not throw it in an oven. Let me repeat. Do not throw it in an oven. Ovens are often not accurate on their thermometer. That is how the fire department gets involved often. And make sure as well when you're doing ABS, ASA, other materials like that, that you vent the area. Someone broke their pins on the motherboard on purpose with needle nose. Ew. So, speaking of which, I accidentally almost messed up my CPU when I was cleaning it off. So, on the Ryzen 3400G that I was, using from there, the thermal paste was a little bit old. So, I went to repaste it. And cleaning it off with 99% rubbing alcohol, I accidentally got some of the excess onto a few of the pins on the other side. So I spent 20 minutes, at least had to be, with 99% alcohol, with clean nylon scrub brushes, trying to get that out, trying to keep the pins in place, using needle nose, needle nose tweezers so that I can scrape off the little bit of the thermal paste and everything. It took me like 20 minutes to get it to a point where I was like, okay, cool, we're clean. Dropped it in the motherboard, said my prayer to the tech gods, and they shined down their blessings upon me, and it worked fine. Do you have an entire home lab of switches, Raspberry Pi, etc.? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. In fact, I have to set up this Raspberry Pi over here because my Raspberry Pi 3B Plus does not have enough memory for the Docker, and it was running into issues that it was doing, which thank you for reminding me because I was in the middle of setting up the Dockerization stuff for it. Yeah. So, but yeah, my home lab, I've got a pfSense firewall running on a Supermicro super server with an 8-core Intel Atom server edition. It's overkill. Eventually, I want to get in a pfSense official firewall so that way I can reclaim that server, turn that into a little Proxmox box. Say that 3 times fast. Proxmox box, Proxmox. That. See, I can't do it. Maybe some of you can. But yeah, I have a pfSense, a Ubiquiti non-PoE 24-port switch, and a Ubiquiti 16-port, I want to say, PoE switch, maybe 24. And I run everything, most of my stuff around the house with PoE. So if you're not familiar with that, that's power over Ethernet. So basically what I can do is... Yeah, there we go. I can send power over this and I don't have to put an extra adapter on there. So you can see it's got lights going on, but I don't have an SD card in there right now. We're going to get Raspberry Pi Imager. So we're going to be setting this up over there. So I do use Raspberry Pi Imager just because it's a little bit simpler to set up Raspberry Pis. But you can easily just image the flash card with DD or something like that. So we're going to choose the device, Raspberry Pi. We want the other because I always forget. Oh, yeah, it's Pi OS Lite. So we're going to want Pi OS Lite, no desktop environment, and get that over there. Yeah, Imager's nice. It's the official Raspberry Pi software. They have a version for Mac, Windows, and Linux, so you can use it on any of the operating systems and have the same flow. But it only works for the Raspberry Pi, but you can do things like, I'll just show you a quick glimpse, but I'm not showing my settings. Set your username and password out the box if you want SSH, configure the wireless LAN, all of that stuff, so you don't have to, you know, go through and make the manual text files to do that, or plug into it manually and then set it up. So, you have options. So while I get this set up, oh yeah, I got my time zone, we'll do that. Okay. And we are gonna erase that. And then we gotta look at what my mods and other people have put in the review on stream channel so we can get some laughs, get some insights, look at different things. Alright, so you can see there was a few things I brought on. Others that others are, you know, putting in. Okay, so. Do we have any that are gonna play in here? No, we do not. Okay, so I can close that. And. Nope, nope, nope. New window. Looking forward to your review for the $60 PC. Yeah, I was interested in seeing that. I haven't seen the video myself. Some of these videos, by the way, I literally see them, and I'm like, I'm gonna watch that on stream with my community. Some of them I get partway through, and I'm like, I gotta watch this with the community. Alright, so let's see what this is.
How does this keep happening? Microsoft made Windows 11 even worse. Again, they broke the update tool right as Windows 10 was dying. Then they made it so that you couldn't use localhost. Then they broke the recovery environment so you couldn't roll back the bad updates. And now this one really feels like they have absolutely no one.
This does not surprise me. Microsoft's testing has gone downhill, as I've talked about.
The latest culprit in Windows going rogue. If you have the newest patch and hit X on Task Manager after you scare your programs into behaving correctly, well then it'll just create another copy of itself.
Wait, what?
And then when you try to close it again,
that is such a weird bug.
Another copy of itself. That's right. The reason your PC is lagging is because it's Task Manager all the way down. All that AI code that Microsoft is generating really is making things so smooth. How does this...
So, everyone blames it on AI code. Here's the thing I will say. You've seen me use LLMs to create code faster than I normally would myself. It doesn't... Vibe coding isn't bad, as long as you are vibe checking, as I've said many times before. The problem is, a lot of people are not vibe checking. What I mean by that is just simple testing. So, in the case of Microsoft, I've talked about this before. Microsoft degraded a lot of their testing. Many years ago, Microsoft literally had warehouses of computers with Windows XP and Windows 7, with all sorts of configurations of hardware, software, and they had a testing suite it would go through. And it would, you know, they would go through and find errors in whatever specific configuration. Oh, it only happened in this, you know, CPU motherboard configuration or this GPU and all that. Microsoft has gone away from that thorough way of testing. And what have they replaced it with? The Microsoft Insider program. What, you really think bleeding edge software and you being a beta tester is, for your benefit? No, it's so they can cheap out. And they know a bunch of people out there like, oh, I can always get the bleeding edge software and, somehow think I'm better than everyone, when in reality, you're just their guinea pig. But the reality also on top of that is a lot of the people that are in the Microsoft Insider program don't even do the obligation you're supposed to have of reporting your issues and giving feedback. So the issue is Microsoft has more poor code coming out because they're not thoroughly testing. And they're relying on users to do the testing more so than they are doing the testing in-house. That is also why Linux has become a much more stable ecosystem, because it's open source. Microsoft is the cathedral, and Linux in open source is the bazaar. The reference there being the cathedral and the bazaar, the famous influential essay that changed a lot of Silicon Valley in the 1990s from Eric S. Raymond. The guy that literally coined the term open source, if I recall correctly. And by virtue of that, Linux has so many eyeballs checking everything going on. So it's not like, oh, I can just Linus can push this out and say, yep, this is what we're going to do. He can. He has the ability to. But the community gets to contribute and give their input as to how the environment and everything is going. So, a lot of people were asking my opinion on Fedora allowing AI-generated code. I don't have an issue with them using AI-generated code, as I said before. Vibe coding is fine as long as you're a vibe checker. We went through a quick 30-minute demo of me making an app, more or less, with LLM using Copilot and Claude 4.5. And I was like, okay, it's going to do this. But as we saw, it made a monolithic Python file. We obviously want to modularize that. It had me hard code secrets. You don't want to hard code things. We had it put a secrets manager in. It was, I don't know if in that test, but I know in my own programs, it was doing a lot of the posting. It was the posting for the Stream Demon, I remember that. It was building it to do it synchronously. So it would be like, okay, we're going to post to YouTube, then Matrix, then Kick, or whatever the order was. Whereas I'm like, this can be done asynchronously. So it would then fire off multiple requests to Google Gemini to get the LLM process for the messages, kick them all back, and do it asynchronously. So they all, so you had things done a lot faster. Vibe code with ChatGPT, then vibe code with Claude. No. But you should have a CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration and continuous delivery, that can do checking in line. And I showed this before with my little GitHub. So I did this as an experiment to teach myself these practices, because I've, used them a little bit in my work, but I was like, I want to set this up. So this is my repo for Stream Demon. This is the software I use to notify when I'm live on Twitch, Kick, and YouTube for Discord, Matrix, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. For those of you that have been asking for Twitter support, unfortunately, Twitter's API has been screwed up by Elon, as I've mentioned. It is not even worth it. You get at most, what is it? I think it's 100 reads or 100 writes per month, and then 500 reads or 500 writes per month. And that's on the free plan, and you're only allowed to have one project and one app tied to that project. And then their basic plan is $200 a month. And that doesn't give you much more. Basic plan is $200 a month. Just how I've touched it. Anyway, that's another rant for another day. But as you can see, we did a pull request. We'll pull this up. So a pull request is basically, I made a branch of code, And, you know, so there's different branches here. I got to clean up some of these. I made a branch of code, and then I worked on that, and then I merged the code in, or at least trying, with a pull request. This is best practice. You shouldn't be contributing directly to main. So that was one of the reasons why I did it this way, was to get myself in that good habit. So you can see Blue Sky hashtag fix was the most recent pull request that I did. You can see what my commits were to fix that. There was an automatic dependency review for checking vulnerabilities and license issues. Then on top of it, there were a bunch of other tests in here, testing it running on Python 3.10 through 3.14, analyzing the code, dependency review, building and testing the Docker image. Does it build right? Does it run right? And then also doing a security test inside of that. As we can see, there's more down here. Published to Docker Hub was after it gets approved. A lint and security check. Scan dependencies for vulnerabilities. SNCC security scan, which is snick.io or sneak.io. I really recommend it for a free software coding analysis. It helps out quite a bit and find coding issues. GitHub also has their security platform, which I use on top of it. They're kind of complementary. GitHub will find things that Snyk doesn't really focus on. Snyk will find things that GitHub doesn't really focus on. So we have code quality check, Snyk code check, Trivy, which is running the Docker. It opens the Docker, runs it, and then sees are there any vulnerabilities. Now, granted, a lot of them are false positives because they're system-related stuff that I can't really touch because it's like libraries and stuff that are on the base system that get pulled in. Yeah, so this is what happens. Do you have rules set up so Claude automatically does these checks on commit? Not Claude. This is GitHub. GitHub has their own. So I can actually have GitHub assigned to a task. So I made an issue here. These are reminders to myself. I could assign Copilot. We can then have a custom agent if they really want. And I can assign it there, and it can at least start building a repository. Building a scaffolding, as I will, of code that I will then want to analyze and see does it fit in. So obviously I want to look at thread support. I have to figure out their API. Or, you know, the request I had for multiple streams per platform. Oh yeah, GitHub is crazy flexible. It is really great. Yes, Microsoft owns them, but they were great before Microsoft owned them. But yeah, GitHub Copilot, not Microsoft Copilot, GitHub Copilot is really great. Microsoft needs to figure out different names for the different products because you have GitHub Copilot, you have Office Copilot, you have Microsoft Copilot. They need to figure out a different name instead of just reusing it because those three are completely different. They are completely different in how they operate. But yeah, so that is a way that I check a lot of my code, because here, I'll pull up. There you go. I brought in some errors over here for diagnostic and had me looking in, and your Pi is running out of resources. And you can see I was doing some tests in here to find out what the minimum amount of memory I need and limits I can put on the Docker. Is purchasing anything having to do with GitHub worth it? Yes, it is. So, the free version of GitHub Copilot. It's not that great. It's all right. But the $10 a month version gives you 300 premium requests included inside of it. I've gone way well past that. I spent an extra like $10 a month on top of it. There is an additional GitHub Copilot Pro Plus plan, which I may end up buying, which gives you 1,500 requests, because if you're getting to that point where you're like close to $30 in totality of your GitHub Copilot Pro plan plus the premium requests that you're doing, you may as well look at that. And it has like GitHub Spark or something like that, which is a suite to create all different sorts of apps and stuff a little bit easier. But GitHub Copilot Pro gives you access to all these different things. So obviously GPT 4.1, 4.0, 5 Mini, and Grok Code Fast, they are included in the plan at no additional cost. You can use them as much as you want. but they're meh. They're meh. Whereas with GitHub Copilot Pro, you got Claude Haiku 4.5, Claude Sonnet 3.5, 4, and 4.5, Gemini 2.5 Pro, GPT-5, and GPT-5 Codex. And those are all included in your $300 a month premium requests. And then after that, it's 4 cents per premium request. And those premium requests can do quite a lot. They can actually chain different tasks together. So you can see it made a test over here. Here, let me scroll up. Test monitoring for all platforms, then plus LLM, basically the .env. And you can see it created a Docker. It had the Docker stop commands, was running it to, see, there was basically this stuff. And it was doing everything that I needed. And a lot of this is stuff I would have done myself, but it's a difference of me spending hours, maybe days to get this accomplished versus minutes. But I also know what I'm doing, so don't just trust the LLM to do everything. It'll make a lot of stupid decisions on its own if you let it. I run Kali as a daily OS, but find it difficult. What is your advice? Yeah, stop using Kali as a daily OS and use Parrot OS at the minimum. I don't recommend using an ethical hacking distribution as a daily driver unless you have a reason to be using an ethical hacking distribution. But if you do, Parrot OS. Parrot OS is, I think, the best of both worlds. If you're looking at something to kind of daily drive everything, I would look at something else and then maybe looking at keeping your ethical hacking to a virtual machine or a separate device. I have my Parrot OS on a separate device. It's an old laptop of mine. But Parrot OS is great. I love it. It's actually so great. They have a version that has the ethical hacking tools removed, so you just have a plain Linux. Oh, no problem. Programming is expensive. This, all the Laravel ecosystem stuff to subscribe to, CSS and JavaScript writes. Yeah, it gets expensive, but I primarily do Python and PowerShell, and Python, Bash, and then a little bit of PowerShell. That's primarily where I do a lot of my stuff. Like Patch Gremlin, which I showed off the other day. This is written in Bash, and what this does, just so you're aware, if you haven't followed this, it's also on GitHub, just so you know, is it sets up a systemd service to monitor when you do your packages, so it'll actually have a hook into apt. There's also a version in here that I have to test for rel, but the code is in there. I just haven't tested it. So if somebody has a rel, a Fedora, CentOS, Amazon Linux, and they want to test it, they can. But this will notify you if and when you do updates to either Discord, Matrix, Slack, and or Teams through a webhook. And I have it built in with Doppler Secrets Manager. Could help with Gen 2 portage. Nobody's really using Gen 2 in production environment. You can build it, but it's not going to be really well used because this is mostly like a enterprise kind of thing. Like, so the way this shows up is I have a chat in here, and the same thing's going to Matrix. And you can see, I've been tweaking this a little bit. So originally it was sending the debug info, like how it would show up in there. And I'm like, this is a little bit of, wall of text for anyone to look at. You can go into the server, but generally what you want is a high-level view. You can enable verbosity if you want. So this way it'll tell me, because I only have security updates enabled, 3 non-security packages are available. It tells me which ones they are, and if any packages were held back. And it runs every night at 2 o'clock in the morning and sets up unattended upgrades. So you don't have to do anything. And then I set up the connection for Discord and Matrix to notify me of that. So that's written in Bash. And did I use LLM for quite a bit of that? Yes. But I also had to correct the LLM quite a few times on, no, you're doing this stupidly. No, it works this way. No, I have to do that. So, as I said, don't ever fully trust the LLM. That's why I crack up when people are like, are you afraid AI is going to take over jobs? No. You never considered automating updates? Yeah, it's totally worthwhile. It saves me a headache. Because then it updates at night. I just have the security updates apply. And then I get the notification. You can have it also. Here, we can actually set this up. Sort of. Yes. Yes, we can. I was like, can we do it? Yes, we can. Okay, so we have our SD card over here written. Gonna plug this Raspberry Pi in. And she should boot up in a second. Yep, there we go. She is on and running. Yep, I got a red light over there. Turning on. Okay, she's doing things. We're not going that deep. So, actually, yes, we'll do it on the LLM server. So, the way that this will work is you're first going to need to grab Patch Gremlin. So, we're going to go to my profile. Patch Gremlin is one of the pinned ones here. And we're going to have to clone this. You can also download the zip file, but meh. God damn it. Really? Don't tell me it went to sleep. Hold on. If not, not a big deal. There we go. Alright. Clean this out. Did you read in the last message? Yeah, that we're automating updates. Was that the last message? Alright, so git clone. Hold up. Before we do that, I like to make a source directory. That's just more of a thing I do. Okay, what the hell? Something's up with the network card. Yeah, I'm gonna have to test that out. I don't want to start ethical hacking, but I told him it's not an entry level job, so advice or switch. Start tinkering in a Homelab. Homelabbing it. Learn the basics. The reality is, you're going to learn more by tinkering in a home lab because, well, the honest truth is... Did it drop packets? No, it's not dropping packets. The honest truth is that, what was I going to say? A lot of people want to go into pen testing, but you have no idea how an enterprise network works. So... for lack of a better way to say this, because I don't mean to come off as much of an a-hole as this is going to sound, but if someone has a better way to put this, let me know. You're not really going to be that valuable as a pen tester if you don't understand how most businesses architect their network, or how to recommend they remediate networks. So if you don't understand how to set up a VLAN, if you don't understand how to segment your traffic, zero trust network access, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, DLP, data loss prevention, or data leak prevention, email security, social engineering. If you don't know, like, a lot of those aspects of it from the enterprise side, you're not going to know jack in the totality of things if you go into the pen testing world. Because you're going to be walking into these enterprise networks and you're not going to know a clue. You're going to drop in and be like, I can't see anything on their network, but I know they have devices here. And you don't understand the zero trust network access, which is why nothing drops on the wire. You don't understand 8021X authentication. And all these different things. Been trunking VLANs in the 90s. Yeah. Nice. You have the same voice as Chester Bennington. Chester Bennington. Why does that name sound familiar? Was that the guy from Linkin Park? Yep. I was like, that sounds familiar. Love Chester. I remember the day he died, I actually was mourning. Okay, I'm not dropping. Speaking of pen testing, should I test my pen? Nice. Okay, so we've got this here. CD and a patch gremlin. I didn't know it was doing the things. I'm gonna have this box on a whole other IP address. I literally just got it set up, and I'm gonna have another VLAN set up and another VLAN set up for the TTS, but I haven't gotten around to that. God damn it. Why does it keep locking up the session? I'm gonna have to dive into that. Giggle snorting. Funny. I'm curious why that's happening. And it's right on, and they're both on wired Ethernet, so that shouldn't be happening. Curious if there's a quick answer from ChatGPT that can answer that. Oh. Oh, that makes sense. Power saving mode could be on. So let me quickly hop into the box. You prefer GPT versus Claude? I use both. I prefer Claude for coding. GPT's okay. IP link. Okay, so... Jesus. This is happening, like, so fast. It's, like, shutting down within, like, 30 seconds. XADP or VNC. I'm doing straight SSH. I wonder. supports Wake on MDIX. Grab my Ethernet information. Wake on LAN is disabled. Power of a culprit. Wanted to give up. Straight from Ubuntu and Debian into the deep end. Wanted to cry. Wanted to give up. Debian is, I like Debian. But Debian definitely has its quirks with how you're doing things. Although I run it on a couple devices. Ah, it's the driver! Yep, see, it froze in the middle of the command. So, yeah, it's the Realtek driver. Realtek is a pain in the ass. It's on a lot of the cheap boards. So basically, this is why I use ChatGPT. Sometimes a little bit easier than going through Stack Overflow and all that. But yeah, so I'm going to have to tweak that server. Because I was like, I know it's not the connection. The ping is completely healthy. But it's dropping the SSH session after like 30 or so seconds. So I'm going to have to go up to the box. I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to do it later. I've been on that box like most of the day. And set that up. That LLM server is probably going to be at least a week-long project of me configuring, tinkering it. Because I have to get the LLMs that I want to get loaded up on there. Mount the disks, set up automatic updates, set up the workflow, set up N8N. I'm deciding if I'm going to have N8N directly run on that box or if I'm going to have another computer run that box. Because I do also have this little guy over here. And I do have a Minis Forum computer that I also am about to replace. So I have options. So the question I'm going to have is... with VLANing it, do I want, I'm definitely going to have at least 2 different VLANs. One for the LLM server, and one for the TTS server. We're going to have text-to-speech, as I said. So the idea is, we'll draw this out so you can understand my thought process here. Been giving Mint a shot over the past few days. I prefer RHEL-based distros, but Mint makes it easy. Mint is rather easy. It's not my cup of tea, but some people like it. So this is draw.io. You see, we are more cultured and professional than just using Notepad. Like some people that pretend to be experts in technology. If you know, you know. Alright, so... basically, this is what I'm planning to do. Someone that worked at Blizzard. Exactly! You know, those people. So, let's see. Where we're going to start with this is... so, TTS is going to start at Stream Elements with a tip. Alright. That's going to be called upon into... I'm hoping I can have my N8N workflow. Now, how this is... ooh, did not mean to do that. So it's going to go from N8N. Now, what's going to happen there is... it's then going to send it to the LLM server. Actually, hold on. There's a few steps in between that. Actually, no. It goes to the LLM server because that's what it needs to do. I'm overthinking that. So the LLM server is going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to do a pre-check. Hate speech, slurs, it's also going to be looking for people that are trying to get around TTS systems. So, like, you've probably seen the videos where someone, I'm not going to say the examples, but you know the examples of how they use other word combinations to call upon other slurs that technically get around TTS and all that stuff. So it will do a check there. Whatever information can be causing harm, stuff like that. And I'm gonna have this open sourced as well, this flow. So if people want to customize it, they can. And this will be happening inside your local LLM server. Well, you can technically do it with anything else, but I'm using my own LLM server. So from there, it's gonna go into Discord. Okay? I may also include a matrix component, but I know that this feature is at least in Discord. So why is it going to go to Discord? There's going to be a mod channel, and this is going to be human in the loop. So I'm not going to allow the, oh, right. I'm completely skipping a step. So the LLM server is then going to kick it back to... wait, hold on. The LLM server is going to kick it back to them. Where it's going to take the workflow... Hope this makes sense. To the TTS server. Audio processing. So it's going to take that code, that LLM, after it does the checks. Wait, no. I completely forgot. There is a box that goes in. This is what happens, okay? So. Hold on. Delete that. Welcome to my brain. If you want to know how ADHD people think, here you go. Okay. So it's going to go to the N8N server. It's going to go to the TTS for the audio processing. Right? Okay, so from there, it's going to go... It's going to go back into the N8N server as part of the workflow. This is a really janky workflow, I know. And we're going to just... Yeah, this is not going to be pretty. Here, we can do it this way. We're going to move you up. Okay. Do I read the chat? I don't know, you tell me. What VPN should I purchase? Ideally, you want to use the VPN that you create yourself. I'll give the disclaimer before I give you my recommendations if you're talking about the consumer VPNs. If you're just connecting from your home network, VPN is not really worth it unless you're, trying to get around certain geo blocks or, shall we say, walk around with a peg leg, go R. I do use a VPN when I travel on public networks because you don't know how they're configured, how it can be sniffing, and all that stuff. With that being said, if you are looking for a particular, a VPN that I recommend, I generally recommend for most people's uses, there's two. Proton VPN, I am affiliated with them. Disclaimer there, if you do want to support the channel, the links are in bio for that. Help support the work in the lab that I do and everything like that. The other option that I do recommend is Molvat. I'm not affiliated with them. See, I do recommend things I'm not always making a buck off. The one thing I will give the caveat for is that if you're trying to use the VPN to go to streaming sites that may be geo-blocked, like say when I was in Portugal to watch the American Netflix, Proton works a lot better with that than Molvad. Molvad is the most private one, but not the most reliable if you're trying to access those kind of services abroad and everything like that. So there are your two options that I recommend. I've talked about this many times, don't use any VPN that is owned by the parent company known as Cape Technologies. If you look up Cape Technologies, that's Kilo Alpha Papa Echo. Cape Technologies. They actually started basically in malware and advertising and that kind of thing. And then they got into buying VPNs and stuff, so they have a bad pedigree of that. Well, they currently own ExpressVPN, Ghost VPN, or CyberGhost. CyberGhost, I think it is. And then they bought out private internet access. So if they're under the Cape Technologies umbrella, stay away. Because you can't trust the parent company. You're very welcome, KM. Why is networking so hard to understand? Well, because networking is very hard. It's not the most simple thing to understand. Primarily because, well, there's so many different pieces that go into it. It's not as simple as, I have IP address I access. Now you have to have DNS. How does DNS work? And all those things. So, yeah. But it is a fundamental thing I tell everyone if you're going to get into tech, you should study networking. I don't care if you're a coder or that. I've run into a lot of devs that don't know basic networking stuff and run into some of the most boneheaded issues that if they knew basic networking, they wouldn't run into. Okay, so for my LLM server for TTS, this is what I'm thinking of doing. All right, imagine you tip in Stream Elements to do a text-to-speech, you put a message in there. It's going to kick off a workflow in N8N, which is then going to send it to the LLM server. The LLM server is going to do a pre-check, hate speech, slurs, things like that. And then it's going to kick it back to N8N. Then it's going to kick it out to the TATS server, which is then going to do an audio processing. I may adjust this flow. I may have the TTS after the human in the loop part of it. But either way, it's going to end up in a Discord mod channel where I'm going to have a few trusted mods and myself, where we can approve these TTS messages to be played. And that's what we call a human in the loop, because a human has to approve what's going on there. Because I am never going to implicitly trust an LLM to make certain actions for me. And the stream's going to, then play the TTS. Now, another thing that I'm also looking at doing is this. So, let's say we have a news source. All right? Actually, we're going to start it off somewhere else. This flow may be adjusted, but you're going to get the high-level view of this. N8N. So it's actually going to pull, no, it's not going to go to, it's going to pull from. Actually, I should probably, move that around. Okay, so it's going to grab the news source from N8N. And what it's then going to do is kick out a flow to the LLM analysis of article. And this could pull out, like, a bunch of things. The keywords, the synopsis of the entirety of what happened, all of that. But I would like it to actually grab multiple sources. Okay? So we'll just, And then, so we'll have like different news sources here all go in, okay? Now, the LLM is going to do an analysis of each of these articles. From there, it'll kick back to N8N. So we'll just put a two-way little arrow there. Now, from that N8N, what I want it to do summarization, keywords, etc. And then what I can have it do, send me a Discord or Matrix message or email. So we can have Discord or Matrix or an email. And it can actually send me basically a daily digest of these news articles or whenever they start coming out. I could even, if I wanted to, have a summarization of articles come in as they do while I'm on stream and kick out its own TTS. So we could have like breaking news. Best Windows Repair Toolkit. It's called Installing Linux. I'm sorry, but you all knew that was coming. There was a toolkit years ago that I used to use from tweaking.com, but it looks like they're no longer doing the freeware side of things. It is still the best one, in my opinion. Can you ask me questions and make one of these for my project? Like what? What would be the most efficient architecture for real-time human-in-the-loop AI voice interaction where latency is under 500 milliseconds? Are you talking about latency between the request going in to the device, or are you talking about the overall processing of it to be done in less than 500 milliseconds? So, the reality is, if you're talking about minimizing latency, you're going to have a local machine. Now, I have not tested... the flowchart. What about it? I'm a little lost there because my brain's going all over the place. I need to go back into the review on the stream as well. We still got stuff to view. So you would definitely need it local. You would definitely need GPU processing, not only for the LLM, but for the TTS. The TTS doesn't need as much of a processor, from what I am told. The 1660 Super with 6 gigabytes of VRAM is apparently just enough for TTS. However, the LLM is going to need more VRAM. That's where it gets expensive. Because from my tinkering, 16 gigabytes of VRAM is about the minimum to have a decent model. My 3070 over here does an okay job with like 7 billion and 8 billion parameter models, which you could probably do fine with that, but you're going to want the 16 gigabyte for headroom. Now, I don't know what the overall processing time is, because that's partially why I am doing this research and building the LLM and TTS in my lab, so that way I can figure out what overall realistically can be done in a quote-unquote, poor man's LLM setup, end quote. So, yeah, I want to flowchart out my project and how it works. Oh yeah, you can definitely do that. You can share the, overall thing as an export. It's not a big deal. Okay. Let us get back to, the review on stream videos. Alright. Sound Blaster is back, baby. All right.
If you're a boomer PC builder, then you'll know all about sound cards and Sound Blaster. We're not gonna call it a comeback just yet, but they're trying. Creative Technology is trying to revive the legendary Sound Blaster brand. They just put this new modular audio hub up on Kickstarter.
Sound Blaster was the shit.
It actually looks pretty cool. This isn't the purpose of the product, but one of the features is that you can very quickly change your audio device.
People don't know how much a sound card was actually required.
I just want one physical button. Aside from that, this hub is powered by an 8-core ARM CPU, and you can mix and match different modular components so you have the exact layout and control that you want. It's also got a built-in DAC for better audio, has all sorts of inputs for your various devices, a smart screen for more control, dual sliders,
thank you for the
and a
follow,
knob.
Demo
I'm
Fox.
usually not a huge audio guy, but I am thinking about backing this on Kickstarter. It looks pretty cool.
So sound cards were actually a huge thing back in the day. They were. So using something like Azure wouldn't work. It could, but you'd have to do all the processing inside of Azure. The issue is if you're grabbing the stuff locally and sending it, that alone is going to be anywhere from 20 to 60 milliseconds, depending on your internet connection, and sending the actual file up. So you would have to have it do the calls in Azure. You could do it in Azure, but it's going to be very expensive. Azure is also not that great at it. You'd probably want to use AWS Bedrock. Bedrock's kind of nice. You can actually train Bedrock on your own stuff. But yeah, sound cards were the shit. I remember there was a sound card I loved. So back in the XFi days, there was this whole XFi sound card. Like, Creative actually tried to do this whole thing of like, you have a GPU to accelerate your graphics. Well, now you have a SPU, a sound processing unit to, make it faster. It didn't really make your computer all that much faster. Like, you offloaded the sound in maybe like a frame or two at most back then. And then AWS dies again. No, that's US East 1. This is why you don't build everything in US East 1. I build my stuff in US East 2. I don't have nearly the same amount of issues. But yeah, I remember the Zuntech sound card, and this was an interesting little device. If I can find... there we are. This was a sweet little device because you see these chips over in the corner. Those are removable op amps, so you could actually change the sound processing to however you felt it could be. This was a really, really nice sound card, but as you can see, it's really old. That's straight PCI. They don't really make sound cards like that anymore. You can get sound cards per se, but it's nowhere near the same. What's this? They actually came out with the PCI Express. Oh, look how long ago that is. 2010. Yeah. See, look. All output op amps are replaceable. This was a really great sound card. So this was, Creative Labs released the XFi chip. Zuntech actually was a really great company that took the XFi and made it even better. So, yeah, we had sound cards. Are they required as much anymore? No. I do say they're a big part of if you want to have great quality sound. Like my Rodecaster Pro 2 over here with the Beyerdynamic DT990s are great. But most people get a sound card and then they have cheap speakers or cheap headphones and it doesn't really make much of a difference. So, but there are motherboards that have great, audio amplifiers and audio systems. Gigabyte's one of them. They have some great audio systems in there for integrated audio, but a lot of times people are using external systems or they're even getting headsets that are going over USB, so it's not really necessary as much anymore. I do miss the sound card era. I will not lie. Let's see. This is Crosstalk Solutions. All right. God damn it. I hate how TikTok does this. They always... Yeah. They always cover this up. And then on top of it, where is the unmute button? Oh, here it is. You always have to unmute TikTok.
Showed up in the Ubiquity store. One of my YouTube buddies noticed this earlier today. When you add certain Unify products to your cart in the US store, there's now a tariff surcharge. So far, it only seems to be affecting cameras, and not even all cameras, only specific models.
Yep.
So for example, here I've got
I told y'all this would start happening, and I think
see the G6 turret has a tariff.
I think more vendors need to show the tariff costs.
No surcharge on the network video recorder instant, but the AI turret has it. The G6 Dome has it. No tariff on the G6 Pro 360, but then the camera AI Dome does have that tariff surcharge. So if I bought all of this stuff that's in my cart, my total tariff surcharge is almost an extra $100 onto my Unify order.
Yep.
And why is this happening only on certain models? Your guess is as good as mine. But if I were speculating,
just because it's coming out of different warehouse. It was the same thing with some of my mesh-tastic hardware. I had to wait until they released the Seed Studio. Sorry, I had a chip go down the wrong part of my throat. I had to wait until my Chinese mesh-tastic device showed up in the California warehouse to not get the tariff. Well, I was still getting tariffed because you see the price difference between the two. Time to buy American. America doesn't make shit anymore. Seriously. We have no manufacturing. We do have some, but like, have you ever tried to get something manufactured in the US? And I mean like, not just like a certain part. We should. Here's the problem. In order to pay the people in America with all that, there's two problems. To pay an American to do the same thing, it's astronomically more expensive. We went through a video that covered this. I think, hold on. Let me see if I can find that. Sure, in America. There was a video, I'll know it when I see it, there it is. I tried to make something in America, the Smarter Scrubber Experiment, Smarter Everyday 308. This was 4 months ago. This is a 50-minute video. It's a great video. Definitely recommend watching it. But he goes through the issues to manufacture any single product, A to Z in America. The issue isn't just the pay. The issue is we don't have the knowledge anymore. If you need to get the dyes for injection molding, we can't make them. Nobody really knows how to make them anymore. Like, there's, I remember, who was it that told me this? There's some kind of camera equipment. I think it's like film roll or something like that. Or something like that. We literally don't know how to make it anymore. There's a lot of technology that we have forgotten how to make. Not just in America, I'm talking worldwide. As we progress in technology. But in America, we don't have machinists. We don't have die makers. That's the problem we got ourselves into. I didn't cause this. Most of us in the middle class didn't cause this. You know what happened? You had the elitists that outsourced everything. Said, because they wanted to position America to be the managers of the world. This goes back to World War II. We wanted to control the world. We became the managers of the world. But we then were not able to produce anything. Because you know the old saying, as they say, those who can't do, manage. If you've ever worked at a corporation, you can basically see that a lot of managers, the work would probably be done whether or not they're there. Now, there are some great managers out there, don't get me wrong, that help out and smooth the flow and communication and all that. But for the most part, there's a lot of companies that have middle management that really don't do much of anything. For example, a lot of people, like when Google was doing layoffs and Facebook was doing, Meta was doing layoffs and stuff like that, they're like, oh, 20,000 people got laid off, 30,000 people got laid off. I forgot which one of my friends or went into the numbers or they found someone that went into the numbers. A large amount of the people that get laid off are middle management. Yes, there are coders and stuff like that that get caught in the crossfire, but middle management overwhelmingly is what gets removed because they see that that's where a lot of the fat is that they can trim. But in America, we basically became the managers of the world, and then the problem is, well, like I said, you can always replace a manager. Now think about why folks are amazed at the pyramids and other historical items. Oh yeah, it amazes me that people are like, aliens had to make this, and I'm like, you're really discrediting the human ingenuity of things that we've done. There have been so many marvels in the world that we have built, like, was it the Babylonian Gardens or something like that? That was human ingenuity, but people don't know how it was built. You know, a lot of the things. But yeah, we hit our targets and KPI when the managers went on their week-long alignment meeting offsite. Yeah, that's funny. That's what's funny is, no joke, I hate coming into the office in my job. I hate it. Why? Because that is the least productive day for multiple reasons. That is the day I guarantee that I'm going to have the most amount of meetings and interruptions, people coming up to my desk. I don't mind the chit-chat as much, but, you know, like, making me shift gears so I can't focus on my tasks at hand. And that is why I am so against return to office mandates. They are dumb. And the only people that are good with return to office mandates are managers that need to micromanage, and they feel like they need to create work for them to be important. And the only way they can do that is by actually proving to themselves that they are managing you by seeing you actually be, you know, told things by them directly. I bet a lot of people here that have done hybrid or completely remote work are far more productive because you do the things in your environment, and then unless you get the Teams or Slack message or the meeting up, you're kind of on a roll. The worst is if you work in a bullpen type of office too. Well, I made sure I structured my week to have meetings all on the same day. Yeah, I would do that too. I'd structure all my meetings that day, and that would be my least productive day. You can literally see the amount of code commits from when I'm scripting and building different terraforms and stuff plummet those days. But managers need to admit return to office mandates are dumb. At most, they should keep hybrid methods. But yeah. Oh, I think we cut off where I was going with the video.
If you're a boomer PC build...
Hold on. Oh yeah. Back to the speculating video. I went on a tangent. When I go back to the office was because I was absolutely tired of being home. That's why I like hybrid. That is genuinely why I like hybrid.
I would say that these tariffs are tied to items that are manufactured in certain countries, or it's possible that equipment Ubiquiti already has in stock here in the US is not affected, but as items are needing to be imported and restocked, we're going to start seeing more and more equipment with these tariffs attached.
I agree with that.
So let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments, and if anyone's thinking about setting up a business, bootlegging Unify equipment in from other countries, definitely don't do it, and I don't want to hear about it.
I knew some people that bootleg cigarettes. Okay. So, Vampire had some good videos in there. Alright, what's this?
Hey man, I've got $300 and I need the best tech gift for my nephew. Well, is he a gamer? Oh, you bet. Stream Deck XL. He doesn't stream. Wireless headset? He prefers speakers. What about a cheap knockoff Game Boy emulator? He's Gen Alpha. He's Gen Alpha. You're right, you can't trust him. What about a WoW Cube? Nah, next. Fine. You could always just, whoa. Hold on, go back. What's a WoW Cube? It's only the best physical and digital interactive display.
What the hell is
How do
this?
you not know about this? Wait a second, that's just like a root. Nope, this thing has interactive games, puzzles, widgets, and it looks sick on your desk. So like some kind of futuristic gaming cube? More than that, this is an innovation piece. And since it's open platform, developers can make their own apps. Oh, now this is the perfect tech gift. Can I have it? Nope, but you can get one at wowcube.com for a limited time deal. Oh, thanks, man. I really think I'm gonna love it. Wait a second, I thought this was for your nephew. What nephew?
Okay, I'm curious. What is this and how much does it cost? It basically just does look like a Rubik's Cube. Okay, so we have this up. Get it by Christmas 2025. I'm curious. $300! F that! I'm gonna just get a Rubik's Cube! I think there are still a lot of managers that just don't know how to use tech. I had a guy who didn't know how to mass print. Oh yeah! There are a lot of managers that literally don't know tech. And I've had meetings with managers that don't understand the things that I'm doing, and I have to walk them through step by step. There are literally, there is a class of people in tech, just so you know. They come straight out of college, work themselves into management, barely do any tech work if they do, go into management because yes, you can make more money in management. But I will never want to be in management because I don't want to manage people. Well, project management I could do, as long as I'm a technical project manager. I want to still be doing the thing, but as a team. But there is a class of people that literally gets out of, school, bachelor's, master's, goes straight into management. They learn the concepts, but they don't know F all about how the thing is actually done, especially at a vendor level. And then they come in with all these grandiose ideas. It'd be great if we could, just do this and all that. And the team's sitting back like, we don't have the bandwidth for that. That's going to require us to get like a head count of 3 or 4 more people just to manage that side of it. Do you find them completely arrogant? It depends. There definitely are arrogant people in all class of tech jobs. You'll find them everywhere. All right. This was shared by someone else in the Discord, but I made a note to actually bring this up. So this is on Fornix. They're a well-known Linux news site that also does benchmarking and testing and all that for Linux specifically. Well-known, reputable company. Steam on Linux Gaming finally cracks 3% for October 2025. That's actually really amazing. Because I'm just curious, if we were to poke at this, Mac user percentage on Steam. Okay. So if we look at the hardware survey, PC card usage, Mac hardware ownership. Okay, that's specific to Mac. So, in October, about 22.34%, what's the best way to actually get this? Because I want to figure out what the total overall operating system is. Hold on. Steam OS usage statistics. I don't know why I just couldn't figure that out. Okay, so if we look at that, there are more Linux users than Mac users on Steam. Let me repeat that. There are now more Linux users gaming than there are Mac users. That's actually pretty huge. You may not think that's huge, but that is. Because that means that Mac is less relevant in a mainstream category than Linux. This isn't like saying like, oh, there are more servers using Linux than there are any other things. Yeah, that's been how it is. You look at the enterprise setting, Linux dominates. You look at the smartphone setting, if you understand what Android is, it's a Linux. Linux dominates. But we're now at 3% here, which means it was already easier for developers to develop on Linux than it was for Mac, because to get a Mac, you have to Xcode, you have to have a Mac-specific one. But, you know, you to make a thing on a Mac computer, and specifically for Mac, it costs a lot more money, it requires more hardware, and it requires a lot more effort than to get it working on Linux, because to do the same thing in Linux, you just can create a virtual machine and compile the same code in Linux, or just run it through the Proton layer. Ta-da! But what that also means is that developers are going to get more bang for their buck, making sure their game is Linux compatible than Mac. And if this trend continues, that means you're going to start seeing developers have to take Linux seriously. And a lot of them already are, because Valve is already evangelizing it. Valve is already saying, we have the Steam Deck. We want you to support this. And they're lobbying all these different companies to make their games work on Linux. And for all intents and purposes, gaming on Linux works, and it works well. There's only one component that seems to be the gotcha. And that is kernel-level anti-cheat. Not anti-cheat as a whole. Kernel-level anti-cheat. Which I don't agree with philosophically even on Microsoft. Microsoft may hold a lot more. But here's the thing. We've seen in tech, technology changes, technology evolves. Windows was not always the dominant operating system. Unix used to be the dominant operating system. Mac used to have a lot more of a say in the marketplace back in the G3 to G5 era with the Mac computers using the Power PCs. You can play Team Fortress 2 on Linux. Hey, you can play a lot of games. I mean, this is my Steam. Pretty much almost all of these games here, like 95% of them, work on Linux. Apex Legends at one point used to work on Linux. Then EA added a kernel-level anti-cheat. But yeah, look at this. I have, 227 games in here. Almost all of them work on Linux. And not even like a complicated, like, oh, I gotta do this to do that. It's like, hit install, hit play, it works. Maybe sometimes I change up to like Proton GE, Glorious Egg Roll Fork that they have of it, which has more bleeding edge drivers and everything. But yeah, I mean, you've got some popular titles in there. You've got the BioShock series. Black Myth Wukong, I was playing that day zero on Linux. Worked fine. Had no issues with it. Borderlands 4, the same issues that people are having on Windows about the lack of optimization. Borderlands 2 and 3 worked fine. You know, Control Ultimate Edition, I got that to work on Linux. All the Valve games work out the box with Linux. It's no big deal. Cyberpunk 2077, same thing. Dark Souls can work on Linux. Haven't played that personally, but I have friends that have played it. Diablo played well on it. Path of Exile, the Doom series has always worked well on Linux. The Elder Scrolls series, Elden Ring works on Linux. I haven't played this, is on my to-do, but I have friends that have been playing it. Far Cry 5 had no issue. Fallout 4, Fear, those old games. Final Fantasy 15. Fortnite? No. Because the kernel level anti-cheat. But at that point, it's the same thing as League of Legends. Like, if it's an Epic game, I kind of just tell people, like, you should probably go find a better game. But Rocket League plays on Linux. There are more games that work on Linux than don't. And there is no argument whatsoever that people will convince me that kernel level anti-cheat is good and should, be done. Because it doesn't even work that well. But anyway. Yeah, so we have 3% of users on Linux with Steam. More than Mac users. That is saying something. And that apparently has been the trend for a while. And Windows is losing 0.5%. May not sound like a lot, but overall, think about how many Windows users are out there. 0.5% actually accounts for a lot of people. I don't think they're going to give you the totality of numbers that equates to, but yeah. And it's gone up by 0.37%. So, if you actually look at the Linux and Mac growth with the Windows shrinking, that's where all of them are going. Like, people are literally leaving Windows. Windows 11 has been one of the biggest advertisers to, move away from that. But yeah. And just last year, in October 2024, Linux was at 2%. So in a whole year, they've gained 1%. And that may not sound like a lot, but that is. Because Linux has forever been like this small, tiny little percentage. And it's growing. And when you think about how many people are using Steam daily, me curious. Let's do some rough math. How many users on Steam? Well over 100 million monthly active users, with recent reports citing ranges from 120 million to 220 million. So if we just do a simple math equation here. All right. Let's go with the low number. That's 5%. 0.5% equates to 500,000 people of 100 million on the low number. So if we take that means there's 3 million people on the low estimate that are playing Linux right now. That may not, when you talk about percentages, that may not seem like a lot. But just think about that. You have 3 million people using the lowest numbers that are doing that. If we take the high end, that ups it to 6.6 million. That's quite a bit. And think about this. Developers want to capitalize on selling their games as much as possible. And if you have a whole segment of the market that is like, I'm not using Windows no matter what, and that's growing, developers are going to have to start developing more on Linux, or, well, having it compatible. And the only issue is the kernel level anti-cheat real issue. So yeah, this is quite impressive, to say the least. Alright, now we have a video that I wanted to take a look at. I
feel like it's pretty common on this channel that I find great deals on used hardware, but when it comes to new hardware, well, I rarely feel like I'm getting a good value. But, well, this little single-board computer might be the outlier. It's got
it's $63.
CPU. It has dual NICs, with one of them being a 2.5 gigabit port. It has multiple options for storage, including onboard eMMC. Heck, it even has a 40-pin GPIO header. But the best part is that I bought this board for just $63.
Wow.
This might sound too...
Hold up. I saw something on that board.
The best part is that I bought this...
That's got a SIM card tray. That's a SIM card tray. So you can put a cell phone in this. A cell phone modem. Now the question is, where's the modem component on this? And how does that work?
Support
I'm
for
gonna have to look
just
at it.
$63.
I don't know what the
This might
name is
sound
yet.
Too good to be true, but at least at the time of filming this, you can go buy it for that price right now. That's not to say there aren't any issues with this little system. Anytime you're spending $63 on a new computer, there are bound to be trade-offs, and well, this definitely has some. But I think this also has some interesting potential, so let's check it out.
Wait, was he playing Halo on it?
Okay, so let's start with a little bit of a backstory of how I even stumbled across this little...
Okay, so it looks like an SMA. No, I'm not sure if that's SMA. Hopefully that is the case. No, you're probably gonna have to make your own case.
For a while now of building a little cluster, or kind of a little mini home lab that's separate from my main setup. That way I can do some testing and stuff, and well, I'll save the details for a future video. But when trying to figure out what systems I wanted to use for that, I had a few different ideas. First of all, after watching some of the 10-inch rack stuff like on Jeff Geerling's channel, where he had some little Raspberry Pis, I originally thought maybe of doing like a little Raspberry Pi cluster, but well, I kind of wanted to stay away from ARM and stick to x86. That way I'd have a few more options of being able to try out different operating systems and such. But when I started looking at x86 single board computers from Latte Panda or Odroid, well, I found that those cost a bit.
Latte Panda. It's in the drawer most of the time because I can do so much with ARM. It's my only x86 board.
More than what I really wanted to spend. Now you might be thinking, well, if you're on a budget, why not use some of the tiny mini microsystems like, well, I've covered on this channel? And that's definitely an option. I mean, I literally have 3 HP Elite Desk Minis that I covered in a previous video, but while those can be good at drawing very little power when they're at idle, they definitely can ramp up in terms of power draw, and they also need kind of bulky power supplies, and honestly, they were probably a little bit overkill for what I was looking to do with my little cluster setup. So I started looking around for different things, and I eventually stumbled across these up-squared boards from a website called Yuyi2, which I guess they actually make their own single board computers. They've actually reached out a few times for me to cover them, and I haven't. But I went on their website just to see what they had, and well, I ended up not using their boards, but I came across these listings for these up-squared boards. They had a few different options of CPUs and RAM, and to my surprise, the cheapest one only cost $63. But that did mean that I was getting a system with only 2 gigabytes of LPDDR4 memory, which is by far the worst thing about this system. But we'll talk more on that later. Now, obviously, I could have spent a bit more.
I can do a lot with 2 gigs.
With a better CPU.
You know, because I use Linux.
RAM, but at that point, I felt like I was starting to get into the territory of just buying like a Latte Panda or something. And also, I just couldn't help but buy a board for $63. Honestly, I was kind of curious about how bad 2 gigabytes would be. So I didn't buy one, I bought 3 of them. This cost me around $188, but then after shipping and import duties,
need at least 4 to 8. I can do a lot with 2
for all 3.
Most of my Pi 4s are 2.
If you've heard of this before, you might be wondering, what the heck is an up-squared board? Well, Upboard is a manufacturer of single-board computers.
I've seen them around.
Just a simple Upboard, which was an x86 version of a kind of a Raspberry Pi-like single-board computer, and they've had a few different models of those, but they also created their Upsquared lineup, which is a more square PCB. It's larger and has more features. These boards are still kind of made for tinkerers, but they're a little bit more so aimed at like the enterprise and automation spaces. My board is part of the Upsquared 6000 series, which is considered end of life, and is probably why I was able to buy it for just $63. The current versions of these feature Intel Alder Lake CPUs that you might be more familiar with, like the N97, but well, this features slightly older CPUs, and mine specifically came with an Intel Celeron N6210. This is a true dual core that was released back in 2021, but it's still built on Intel's 10nm process node, and has a TDP of only 6.5 watts.
Like, compared to a Pi 4 and a Pi 5, that's not a lot. The Rock 64s, the Rock Pro 64s. It would be a nice firewall, don't get me wrong. This is an Intel CPU. If it's got an Intel network interface card on there, with the dual NIC feature, that could easily be a nice little pfSense box. What's up, Bark?
As I mentioned earlier, this only comes with 2 gigabytes of LPDDR4 memory, and it also comes with 32 gigabytes of onboard eMMC storage. On the back of the board, you get those 2 Intel NICs that I mentioned, with one of them being a 2.5 gigabit NIC.
That may be a power port.
And then you also get DisplayPort, HDMI, and 2 USB 3.2 ports. There's also this threaded barrel jack adapter for a 12-volt power supply, as well as this teeny tiny little power button. The board has a lot of options when it comes to expansion and different connectors. One of the first things you'll notice are the three
open
M.2
sense on x86, but not
on
ARM.
one side, you get an M.2 E key slot, which supports one lane of PCIe Gen 3, and then above that, you also get an M.2 M key slot, which only supports 2 lanes of PCIe Gen 3. On the other side, you get this M.2 B key socket, which, well, I'm not entirely sure if this supports PCIe or not. And I say that because, well, I wasn't really able to test this. I kind of tried, but I couldn't get anything working. However, in the datasheet, it does have pins for this for PCIe. Now, I should mention one of the awesome things about this board is the documentation. On their website, you can find everything from the datasheet to a user manual, but they also have like various schematics and like 2D drawings with all of the dimensions.
That's rare
and they even
from
have,
the non-Pi boards.
So if you wanted to like 3D print a custom case for this or something, you can, which, well, I should also mention this doesn't come with the case, so you're going to have to get creative with how you mount it. I was actually kind of fumbling around a bit with this during my testing and eventually used those schematics to build just like a very simple 3D printed stand just to kind of prop this up while I was doing testing. But back to the board, there's also a SATA connector. However, the power connector for that is this odd little 2-pin connector here, which I don't have a cable for, and there isn't one in the box.
A laptop type connector,
obviously, there's a 40-pin GPIO header that I mentioned, and, well, I don't really deal with a whole lot of like makery Raspberry Pi stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely for developers.
Very similar to the pinout of the Raspberry Pi GPIO. I think all of the pins don't necessarily support all of the same protocols and such, but I think this actually might be compatible with some hats. I think your luck might vary, but it is there if you're wanting to use this for like automation and such. Like I said, this was actually sort of one of the purposes of this board. Oh, and I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but, well, it's pretty obviously just passively cooled with this big heatsink on the bottom, or top, depending on how you want to look at it. All right, so this board's a little odd. Why would I actually want it? Well, mostly because I got it for $63. If I was buying this for the original like asking price,
for $63, it's not too bad, but
no way I would be interested. But if I can buy 3 of them for that price, well, now we're talking. Normally, I wouldn't be that interested in a board like this because I don't do a whole lot of like the makery stuff, but, well, it does have a fairly modern CPU. It has got dual NICs. There's some cool stuff you could do with this. I think right off the bat, one of the first things I thought of was just setting up a very simple low-powered router. I'm assuming this board's not going to draw a lot of power. It has dual NICs. One of them's 2.5 gigs, so like.
So here's the problem with this, okay? Don't get me wrong, it's a nice board. But I'm looking at the Raspberry Pi 5. Just as an example. You have double the RAM, 4 gigabytes, a quad-core ARM 8076 processor for $60. Like, don't get me wrong. This is a nice little board here if you're doing like a firewall or such setup, but yeah.
If you don't have layer 3 switching and you want to be able to route between different VLANs at 2.5 gig, you could set up this 2.5 gig port as your LAN, and there you go. You have 2.5 gig routing.
Well, I was just using Raspberry Pi as an example. You can use a ROC 64 or whatever. Same concept.
Tasks. Or if you're like me and you're interested in building a little cluster, having some small passively.
Wait, what was that he had?
Set this up as a lightweight little server.
Oh, Home Assistant.
Like Home Assistant or other simple tasks. Or if you're like me and you're interested in building a little cluster, having some small passively cooled low power systems that you can get for pretty cheap that also have like dual.
But I'm not seeing why you need an x86 board to do this.
Well, let's actually check this thing out and see if it's worth the $63.
So I'm curious what he actually needs an x86 board for, because ARM capability on Linux is so extensive right now. There's very few things that I can't do on an ARM platform. So I'm curious where he's justifying, hey, this is a little bit better than an ARM that actually has better specs on paper than this guy for the price.
Spent on it. Now I should mention, similarly to how it doesn't include a little SATA adapter, this also doesn't include a power adapter in the box. Literally the only thing in the box is this board. So you will have to bring your own 12-volt power supply. Fortunately, it just uses a very standard 5.5 by 2.5 millimeter DC barrel jack. After getting it plugged in,
that's going to be another 10,
well, I was
15
a little bit scared because I ran into this password for the BIOS. However, I just hit enter and that worked. The BIOS was pretty simple. There wasn't much to talk about. However,
it's an actual BIOS, not a UEFI. I like that.
I started things off by just installing Debian 13, and rather than installing it to an NVMe SSD or anything, I just installed it straight to the eMMC storage, which worked just fine. Once I had an OS installed, the first thing I wanted to check out was just how low powered this thing was. So I made sure the HDMI cable was unplugged, and then I ran PowerTop AutoTune.
So you installed Debian
PM script, and
not
after running all of
following why you need x86
to around 6.8 watts, which is very low to be clear, but I was kind of hoping with a system like this that the power draw would be even lower. But, well, as I've said many times on this channel, when it comes to idle power draw, it's not just the CPU that's drawing power. You have your memory, and you have storage, and you have your network interfaces, and then all of the other various things that are on the motherboard, which, well, that got me thinking. This thing has the GPIO and all of the different serial connections and everything else that I saw in the BIOS, and well, maybe that was what was drawing some power. So I went in the BIOS, I disabled everything I could find, and well, the power draw was still exactly the same at 6.8 watts.
It's the Intel CPU.
It's not bad. I was hoping it might be a little bit lower, but that's pretty darn low still. And the good news was when I actually ran a stress test on this, the power draw only jumped up to like 9 watts. In fact, I think the highest power draw this thing ever hit was like 12 watts, and that was when I was hitting the CPU and the GPU pretty hard. So while the idle power draw might not be crazy low, it is good to know that even if this thing's running at like 100%, it's not going to be drawing more than like 10 watts probably if you're not using the GPU. In fact, one of the benefits of knowing that this isn't going to draw a ton of power is that you can actually run this over PoE. Well, sort of. It's not like a built-in feature or anything, but
you'd have to put a hat.
You know that this thing's never going to really draw a ton even under load. You can use a simple adapter like this one to power it over PoE, and yeah, sure enough, even with a cheap little PoE switch,
that'll
it
work
worked just fine. Now, part of the reason this thing doesn't draw a ton of power is because it does have a dual-core Celeron that is not that powerful. I ran Geekbench 6, and well, you can see here we're getting scores that are about half that.
Back to the Pi, I said. The Pi is much more powerful.
The prices of a Raspberry Pi 5 2GB model, and once you factor in the cost of like a micro SD card and the power supplies for both and everything, they're pretty much the same price as what I paid for this. So if you don't mind running ARM, that's probably a much better deal. Performance wasn't that great, but it was still better than some other low-powered older systems that I checked out that managed to do pretty
money now I'm there and won't get eat. Getting money in the daytime, even count it when I sleep. Wake up to getting bread, bitch, I do this for the streets. ADHD. Put me to face the game, so open up my
thank you for the sub there, Mr. Militant. Thank you. See? That's great. I can prove the printer works. Yeah. Look at that. Thank you for the follow, the subscribe and follow. Appreciate it. I finally got to prove it worked outside of testing. That's a good news. That's why I'm happy.
And realistically, I had a feeling that the 2GB of RAM was going to be the bigger issue. To test that out, I started off by installing Home Assistant OS, which actually worked just fine. I wasn't concerned about the CPU or anything with the system, but I was a little...
Okay, I'm pausing again because I need to bring this up again. What is he showing specifically that he couldn't do with an ARM board like a Raspberry Pi or Rock 64 or something like that? That's what I'm just trying to figure out.
Concerned about how
everything he's shown
work out,
can be done on a Pi, a Rock 64.
And sure, this was just running a very simple config that I imported that I kind of used for testing, but I decided to look at my actual Home Assistant instance, which is running in a container, and that was only using
We'll talk about that in a sec, Mark.
So realistically, I think for a pretty common standard
Remind me after the video.
This thing would work just fine. But like I said, you could also do that just fine with something like a Raspberry Pi. But this guy has something that
that's my point.
Pi or a lot of other single-board computers don't, which is not only dual network interfaces, but a 2.5 gig interface as well. So you could install something like OpenSense or OpenWRT and set up a DIY router. Now,
I mean, that makes sense.
OpenWRT on this little guy because, well, OpenWRT could probably run on a literal potato.
And we've discussed that a little earlier.
OpenSense.
Okay.
I did look up the minimum system requirements, and it showed that it only required 2GB of RAM, so I thought we'd be okay. However, I did end up getting a warning that I needed 3,000 megabytes to copy over the system image. I just proceeded, and it worked just fine. However, I should note that I installed this using UFS, not ZFS, as I figured ZFS would probably require a bit more RAM.
Yeah.
After getting it installed, I hooked up my laptop to the LAN interface, and sure enough, everything seemed to be working just fine. The RAM usage was actually quite a bit lower than I expected, and I never saw the CPU usage go up more than like 70% or so. Without putting together a crazy test setup with a 2.5...
I know I'm pausing a lot, but how... But what was he doing on the OpenSense? Was he just doing basic routing? Because the second you start doing block lists, like you start putting in like the pie hole lists, you can import them just like I do on my pfSense. And then when you start having it do IDS, IPS, it's going to blow way past that. So you'd still need something a little bit more powerful. I think it'd be a nice little tinker device to make a firewall, but then again, there's so many other options to make a cheap firewall.
Gig switch and VLANs and multiple devices.
It's an up-squared board.
Test the 2.5 gig throughput, but I was able to at least test on an open speed test server that's upstream of the router, and it seemed like the gigabit throughput was just fine. So like I said, if you don't need like one of those little 4-port firewall appliances you can get on AliExpress and such, you just need a simple little 2-port router, but you want to buy something new that's low powered, this thing might do a pretty decent job. Now, one thing I test pretty commonly on hardware is running Proxmox because, well, that's just my hypervisor of choice. But I wasn't really all that hopeful that I would have a good experience here.
Yeah, you don't have much memory there.
I did try installing it on the eMMC, but as I expected, that didn't work, so I had to drop in an NVMe SSD. Now, the minimum system requirement for Proxmox does show 2 gigabytes of memory, but that's the 2 gigabytes that you need to actually run Proxmox.
Yeah.
That doesn't include the memory you would need to run stuff on top of Proxmox. And once I got it installed, you can see that I was using 70% of my memory just sitting idle running Proxmox. So VMs were clearly out of the question here.
Not if it's Hannah Montana Linux.
But I was curious if I could run a few LXC containers on that last little bit of RAM that I had. I cautiously created a couple of simple Linux containers just to see if the system would crash or anything, and that seemed to go just fine. So I went ahead and installed a board by Upsquared where I actually ran WireGuard.
It's an end-of-life board,
which I thought might be
like $63
decent way to use this as sort of like a little edge, VPN server of sorts. And well,
thank you,
that seemed
Upsquared
to work
6000.
okay as well. I was actually kind of curious and went and looked at my Proxmox server to see how much RAM my various LXC containers were using, and it varies a lot from like multiple gigabytes to like, 10 megabytes or so. So technically, I guess you could run Proxmox on this as long as you're only running some very lightweight LXC containers and services, and realistically, even then, over time, you're probably going to run into RAM issues, so it's probably a lot smarter to just run something like Debian or maybe even like Ubuntu server and then just run Docker on top of that. Now, I was a little bit bummed that I had to use that NVMe SSD for Proxmox because, well, it would be nice to have that M.2 socket for maybe some other adapter, like if you wanted to use a 2.5 gig NIC or something. And normally I would leverage like the E-key slot for different adapters like that, but, well, it's in this really awkward spot where it's underneath the M-key slot. So realistically, if you tried to install like a bigger adapter there, you wouldn't be able to put an NVMe SSD on top of it. I did find, though, that if I use this very specific E-key to M-key adapter, which sort of reverses the orientation, I could just barely squeeze in an NVMe 2030 SSD. However, I couldn't even screw it in and had to just rely on another NVMe SSD on top of it, sort of sandwiching it in place. And sure enough, this actually worked. However, long-term, I don't imagine thermals would be great, having two of those NVMe SSDs just touching each other. I did kind of experiment with putting a little thermal pad between them, which it did bend the top SSD a little bit. But my thought is that if you put a heatsink on the top SSD and then put a little thermal pad between them, you might be able to sort of draw some of the heat from the bottom SSD into the body of the other SSD, and then that one has a heatsink, so maybe it would sort of even out.
Yeah, but it's an insulator, it won't work that well.
It's an odd setup. The other option for storage that might make more sense is that SATA port, but as I said, it uses this odd little 2-pin connector for power.
I think that's the same as a laptop SATA connector.
I could use to make that work. What I did have, though, was this little USB adapter for SATA power. However, that is designed to work with an eSATA connection, so I also had to use another adapter from eSATA to SATA, and, well, it wouldn't be a Hardware Haven video without a weird mess of adapters. But, yeah, sure enough, that worked just fine. So I guess you could use USB power, or you could try to crimp a little connector if you found it.
Could use a USB, like,
there.
SSD.
I guess you might be able to just buy one. I didn't actually think to look on their store.
Oh, it's just the JST?
So
okay.
I will figure that out in the edit.
Yeah, see,
when I was digging through my little bin of USB installers, I happened to stumble across Chrome OS Flex, which I hadn't used in a while. I decided to give this a shot, and while basic web browsing wasn't terrible, and I was able to at least watch some YouTube videos at 1080p 30, but anything beyond that led to dropped frames. I wasn't expecting this to work that well as a desktop or anything with just the 2GB of RAM, but what I thought it might handle decently well was operating as a true thin client or a streaming PC. I installed Ubuntu to try to keep RAM usage as low as possible, and then installed Moonlight to stream from my gaming PC. And the experience here was great. Most of the latency was actually due to the encoding time on the server side. Everything was buttery smooth, regardless of whether I was trying to get some work done on a 4K monitor or just playing a bit of Halo. So in conclusion, this system, well, it's kind of weird. It's not great at anything. Outside of like a very low-powered, simple, cheap DIY firewall, there's not a whole lot that it does better than something else. If you're looking for like a simple little lightweight server to run like Home Assistant or something like that, there's cheaper new options and definitely cheaper like old used options as well. It's a little awkward because it doesn't come with a case or a power supply or anything.
That's the issue.
You're going to have to like 3D print a case or something for this, unless you just want to kind of leave it sitting on the heatsink like that or whatever. The 2GB of RAM is definitely an issue and will definitely limit what you can do with this, but, well, I guess for the right use case and the right price, which for me was $63, so yeah, not too bad. This could be a very interesting little system. They are end of life, so keep that in mind. That's why they're
SMB file server, maybe.
Yeah, if you're able to pick one of these up and it kind of fits your needs, it's kind of a cool little quirky system.
If I'm doing a file server, I want at least RAID 1.
Single board computers a lot, so this is kind of a fun, different look at something interesting. And I'm still planning on making a little kind of 3D printed 10-inch rack cluster out of these, so stay tuned for that. Oh yeah, you also probably noticed that this video didn't have any advertisements in it, and that's thanks to my amazing RAID members. If you're not a RAID member, which, well yeah, I know you're not a RAID member, because if you were a RAID member,
they have a version
right now.
So they have a version that has more memory. They have 4 and 8GB versions. This was just the 2GB version, but at the point, you start looking at the 4 and 8GB version, you're kind of like looking at like Netgate official firewall and stuff like that. It's an interesting little device, don't get me wrong. But would I go and buy one? Probably not. So, funny story, my pfSense firewall only has 2 gigs of RAM. Mine is 16. Not because I needed that. I literally wanted to have dual channel memory so it had the most amount of bandwidth. And I think it's running DDR4? And the smallest I could get, or was it DDR3? The smallest I could get in ECC sticks was 8GB. So I have 2 8GB sticks in there. So what I did was I moved the temp and the var files, I think temp and var, those sections, they run on a RAM disk on the RAM. So every time it boots up, it has a clean slate. That works pretty nicely. I'm in the process of building a new one. Mine is DDR2. Yeah. I want to get an official Netgate server. I want a lot of things. I also want an NVIDIA DGX Spark, but I just built my LLM server with the 5060 Ti and a 3050, and I got to set up the basic stuff behind it. So, Bark, you were asking about the sub printer that I have. So, basically, it's using 2 components. StreamerBot, and then there's this OBS panel I have. I can't really show because I don't have OBS to set up to show my Windows box because I never really show the Windows box and what's going on there. But it's using StreamerBot. The add-on was made by a streamer known as Nutty. He makes a lot of cool streaming stuff. And a couple years ago, I had a version of this, if you recall, and it stopped working. And it was like a cheap, printer and all that. So now we have this Rongta or whatever. It's an $80 thermal printer with 80mm paper. And I can, it has an auto cutter in there, so as you saw, it'll print it out and then cut it off. So, I don't know what I'll do with these, but it's kind of a fun thing, I figured. Makes it all nice, you got music, all that. But it'll go off when I have, It'll go off when I get a cheer, sub, raid. There's YouTube stuff, Kick stuff, Stream Elements when I get a tip. So I need to build a device which can play in audio at different times of the day. The times are different for each day, which will be fetched from an API or a local database. Should I opt for an Arduino or a Pi? That'd probably be a Pi. You want an actual computer for that because Arduino's good for simple tasks. Now you could have a Pi send stuff to an Arduino, but the Arduino is not as good at doing like API calls and things like that. So yeah. But yeah, that's an interesting, board for $63, that little mini PC he showed. But it's end of life, which is another issue. And you have to get a case for it. So it becomes a problem. If you want to, like, really do anything with it. And honestly, I'm more of a fan of the Intel Atom CPU than I am the Celeron at that point. If we're talking low-powered compute. Like, my server is running an 8-core Intel Atom server edition, and it works really nicely. That robe says DEFCON. It's not a robe, it's a lab coat. This was a, DEFCON lab coat. I didn't buy it at DEFCON, I bought it from someone who has DEFCON. Had it. Yeah, there's also a DEFCON flag. There's DEFCON flag over here too. Orange Pi has some nice SBCs they just came out with. Yeah, Orange Pi is nice. I've been more particular fan of the Rock 64 and Rock 64 Pro. So the big thing that I need to have is PoE. That's my big thing. Like all of my Pis. Ooh, that fan's going. I forgot this is, running. All of my Pis run on PoE pretty much. Even my Pi 3B pluses. 201. Hold on. Trying to remember. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get the IP address for that Pi so we can at least start setting it up. Forgot what address I assigned it. Your response. I already have 2 mini home servers running. Excited for a new edition of Pi or some other SBC. Yeah, I mean, the Raspberry Pi is, of course, the most popular one, but there's a lot of other options out there. Finally Libre booted your T480. I don't know why there's all this hype all of a sudden, of Libre booting laptops. Don't get me wrong. I'm not shunning it by any means. I don't... Do I have it here? I don't know if it's here. The headphones are on. Hold on. Yeah. It is here. Okay. This is my Purism Librem 14. It comes with Intel Management Engine disabled out the box. It has a fork of Libre boot called PureBoot, which also works with my security key. This is just a backup one. It's not set up. But basically, I can plug this in, and I can actually verify the integrity of the firmware and the boot files. So whenever I update the kernel, I have to re-sign the kernel with PGP. This is using PGP and HOTP. So, this is... No, I think it's a fork of Core Boot. Either way, Core Boot and heads is basically the concept. Now, what I'm actually looking at replacing this laptop with, because don't get me wrong, it's a great laptop, but Purism is still selling 10th gen Intel CPUs if you buy a brand new one of these. And if and when I go to replace this laptop, I don't want to buy the exact same laptop with the exact same specs. I want to get something newer. So I've been eyeing this company out of, I want to say they're in Germany. Make sure, hold on. Oh, I just realized they take Monero and Bitcoin. That's nice. Crap. Where are they based? Contact. Plus 31. Oh, Netherlands. Sorry, not Germany, Netherlands. But they have this laptop I really want to get. It's running Intel 14th generation CPUs. It's called Nova Custom. You can get it with the Shoro Core Boot out the box. 14-inch model. You can get like the Intel Core Ultra 7 in there. You can fully load this bad boy. 96 gigabytes of memory, which would be an upgrade from 64. And then I was looking at, I'd probably ship it with no operating system. If I can, because then what you can do is... Hold on, where's the option? Do you need oh, you have to have cubes, I think, selected for it. Where was the option? There was an option in here for heads. Did they get rid of it? On electronic shelf labels, you mean the automatically adjusting ones? They are jank. I don't like them. I don't like the idea that they can come in and just, you know, update the pricing dynamically. I don't like that. Options like the photos of the main board to see if it was tampered with. Yeah, Purism does a lot of that stuff, but Purism's a US-based company, but they're just a little bit behind. Was it this laptop? I could have sworn it was this one. Did they get rid of the heads one? They had a laptop, I could have sworn, that allowed you to pick... maybe I have to pick the CPU. Hold on. So let me just spec this out quickly. Ah, there we are. Now it shows up. This is what I want. Core boot and heads, which is literally what I'm doing now with my Purism laptop. So the way that works, basically, is you have a Nitro key, which is what this guy is. You sign it to the firmware and to the boot files. And every time you turn the computer on, you can plug this in and have it confirm if the signatures match. Basically, it's anti-evil maid protections. So... this is not something I would recommend most people. This is definitely more of the advanced side of things. But then again, if you're using Cubes OS, I say in general, don't start using Cubes OS unless you're comfortable with Linux. Because it is Linux Plus. There's a whole other mindset that goes around to it. A flipper is going to be fun in stores. Yeah, we can do a lot of fun things. But yeah, I definitely want to get the V54 with the Shara core boot. This is Nova Custom. That's the company I'm thinking of getting to replace my Purism Librem laptop. And I've heard good things about them. I just know that if and when I replace my Purism Librem laptop, I don't want to buy the same exact laptop. Because this is what I currently have. The Librem 14. Now, don't get me wrong. When I bought this laptop, it was killer. It was top of the line. It's still pretty good. It still serves me well. But when my devices start wearing down, I don't want to replace it with the same exact laptop. Now, they say they're going to have the Librem 14 V2, but I'm curious what CPU it's going to have, because right now I'm rocking a Core i7 10710U, which is decent, but I want something better. I have 64 gigs of RAM in there. I have a 1 terabyte NVMe and all that stuff. And again, nice laptop. But, yeah, it's just, yeah. And the problem is, Purism as a whole has not really been keeping up. So, hold on. They've really been falling behind on things. Like, yeah, they have posts on their blog, but the Librem phone was definitely a letdown. This is the Liberty phone. That's the Librem phone made in the USA with an extra gig of RAM. That's basically the upsold version, upgraded up version of this. I bought this to try it out. It's been sitting on my desk most of the time. I haven't really been a fan because it's a little bit clunky. It's a little bit slow. I think there could be, you know, a lot. They dropped the ball a lot. And what I was definitely interested in was their tablet they had, but they're just so expensive for the stuff. Now, I do have their Librem Mini, but I got this as part of a different project. So Start9 sent this to me because Start9 used to have their Server Pure line on this. Now, this is a Core i7, can't remember which one it is. But this is running Pure Boot as well. That's running a Core i7 510U, so 4 cores, 8 threads. I think this has 32 gigs of RAM in here. And I want to say a 1 or 2 terabyte NVMe. I can always, you know, upgrade this. It's just basically a little nook. And I think it'd be, you know, a great little device, but, yeah, well, Start9 was a great project, too. Don't get me wrong. Not familiar with Pure Boot. Is it no binary blobs? Yeah, Pure Boot is basically a fork of Core Boot that Purism runs and maintains themselves, that they guarantee support for their products. So it's essentially the same thing as Core Boot. Libre Boot and Core Boot, there was a divide a long time ago, ideologically, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, chat, the Libre Boot people kind of went off the edge. Like, yeah. No, it's 20, okay. Wait, is this even gonna load? No. Libre Boot stuff and their stance on binary blobs. Yeah, well, you can't really function in the modern world without binary blobs. That's just the unfortunate reality of things. 213 14.10. Where, oh where is my damn pie? No, that's the LLM box. No. Why do I feel like it didn't actually go through? Well, that's just wonderful. Yeah, it's not even registering. So I'm curious. What all is this? Ah, crap. I forgot. It's not a regular HDMI. Yeah, I'm gonna have to tinker to figure that one out. I thought I had a micro HDMI adapter. And you can't have everything like microcode and firmware. Yeah, you'd have to go back to the Intel Core 2 days if you want to go blobless. Because here's the thing. A lot of people don't understand that when they're like, I'm disabling Intel ME. You're not fully disabling it per se, because the reality is you have to at least have it up just to turn the computer on and initiate the test services that you need, and not the startup services that you need, and then it turns off. So there's a bit you can flip inside of it. The NSA actually had the documentation on this, because the NSA themselves didn't like this feature. Now, the thing I don't like has nothing really to do with Libre Boot itself. There's a lot of people that are giving misinformation saying, oh, this was a Mossad backdoor or something like that. I'm like, no. It was Intel Management Engine, which at the enterprise level actually makes sense. It's just a coprocessor that allows you to do out-of-band management. What does that mean? You have a fleet of devices. You can make sure that they turn on, do their firmware updates and all the deep-level stuff, and you can coordinate that lot better. Yeah, I know there's like IPMI, stuff like that in the servers, but yes. I don't like that people are spreading that misinformation. Like, here's the thing. People like to go around saying, like, the Mossad, like it's a superpower or something like that, or, you know, things like that, but the reality is, if anything, the NSA is behind a lot of this stuff, but in this case, it's purely Intel that on an enterprise level, it makes sense. You do want Intel ME. Where it doesn't make sense is why when they're selling consumer products that it is enabled. Why they didn't make the feature so that you could disable it inside your UEFI or BIOS. That's the part that makes no sense to me. Because essentially, have I seen Mr. Robot? Of course I have. The first season's the only good one. After that, it goes downhill. But, what I was gonna say is, crap. Lost my train of thought. Damn it. Oh yeah. Essentially what Intel Management Engine is, though, like I said, it's a coprocessor. It's actually its own computer inside your computer, running the Minix operating system. Minix is a microkernel Linux architecture, very small. There was a historical dispute between Linus Torvalds of Linux and what's-his-face Tenenbaum, I think was his name, that made Minix. And this isn't just me making stuff up. The Intel Management Engine, also known as the Intel, about that, is an autonomous subsystem that has been incorporated in virtually all of Intel's processor chipsets since 2008. Okay, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Hardware. Starting with ME11, introduced in Skylake CPUs, it is based on the Intel Quark x86 32-bit CPU and runs the Minix 3 operating system. So like I said, it is its own computer inside your computer, essentially, for simplistic terms to translate what it is, act as a web server. Simple, NSA wants access to any device. No, that's not what it is. Now, does NSA exploit these vulnerabilities in these systems? Yes. Does the NSA actually request that these be done? No. And that's where I get upset with people when they're talking about, like, all these conspiracy theories. Because don't get me wrong. Thank you for the follow there. Matt Cheese. But this is where I get upset with a lot of people when they get into this like tinfoil hat, thinking that the government's behind everything. Does the government do a lot of bad things? Absolutely. You've heard me rail about a lot of different things. But not everything is the result of the government. A lot of things that happen are the result of companies making really bad decisions. They don't need to exploit Intel ME with so many zero-day OS and browser. Yeah. Join Hack Nexus? I thought I was in that server. There's been so many servers I'm a part of, but I'm just so busy. And I got so many different servers, it's hard to keep track of which I'm in. Did you remove the French language from your OS to lower the bloatware? Non, je parle un petit en français. But I did remove a lot of other languages out of the system at one point. I don't think I do that anymore. It used to make sense when there's a lot, but yeah, when it comes to, exploits you're talking about, come on. With the amount of kernel-level anti-cheats out there, we've already seen proof. People have been able to use kernel-level anti-cheat as part of an attack chain, which is why I hate kernel-level anti-cheat, because I've brought this story up many times. Genshin Impact. There was a POC around their kernel-level anti-cheat to be used to, compromise a system. The person who made the POC reported that. The parent company of it, of Genshin Impact, I forget who it is, didn't do anything about it. There was an attack chain that went out where they were using Genshin Impact's anti-cheat. Not as part of a game. Because a lot of people, when I say this, don't seem to understand. They used just the anti-cheat. They pulled it out of Genshin Impact, put it on in their attack chain, and had it basically be able to go in and turn off their antivirus. And they infected, I forget how many people out there, but there was like a few hundred or something. It wasn't a very big thing, but it was enough where it should have been a wake-up call. And how did this get to be allowed to be done? Because Genshin Impact didn't pull the cert, apparently, and fix the hole around that old version. Which goes back to the point that I always say, that game companies are not security companies. I don't trust them with the security of my machine. I can see arguments possibly being made for security software having kernel-level access, but even I've, as of recently, going to a few talks with people that are much smarter than me on this entire subject when I was at GurCon, come to the conclusion that maybe security software shouldn't need it either. At least to the levels that they're doing right now. Look at what happened to CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike shut down the entire world because they were causing blue screens of doom around the world. What's the best way to get into cybersecurity? What kind of education? Start with IT, build from there. Cybersecurity is rarely a field that you can just break into, as you know, like you just go straight into there. You have to have foundational knowledge to be able to understand how to penetrate and secure systems in cybersecurity. And in cybersecurity, there's many different aspects of it. A lot of people, want to be penetration testers. That's honestly the hardest, gig to get into. And there's far fewer jobs in penetration testing than there is in the blue team side of things, defending things. And on that side, you've got networking, you've got general engineering, you've got code security, so DevSecOps as well. You've got GRC, governance, risk and compliance, identity and access management. There's so many different aspects to it. But either way, all of these different parts of it require a base understanding of the other components that you're building on top of. I have a connection, but I don't know where to start. Is getting a degree in CS the way to go? I don't have a degree in that. I never went to college for cybersecurity. I learned pretty much almost all the stuff I have in my home lab, tinkering and hanging out with buddies and, just learning through osmosis and going to conferences and everything like that. Some people see value in it. I'm not going to say absolutely not. Some people, college is the way they learn. Some people it's not. But the reality is, whether or not you go to college, a classroom will only be able to teach you concepts. There's a huge jump when you are doing things in a classroom versus when you're doing them in the actual field. I've met a lot of people that have gotten their bachelor's, their master's in IT, cybersecurity, whatever, and they don't understand half the shit I do. I'm not trying to say that to, be egotistical or, that. You run into a lot of people that are in the field, they will tell you the same thing. Some of the best people in this field never went to college for this. Some say Systemd is an exploitable backdoor, not the Unix way. Thoughts? Systemd is basically another operating system that we're waiting for its own office suite to come. Okay, no, but seriously. Did I have my issues with Systemd when it originally came out? Yes. Because you look at init scripts and you're like, it makes more sense. It's in the Unixy philosophy. You have one thing to do, one process and do it extremely well. That's the Unix way. Systemd doesn't follow that. It's a collection of different things. But I will say this. Now that I've used Systemd for a few years, I find it's a lot better. Here's why. Systemd allows for a better system of going through the logs and troubleshooting and diagnosing things because it's pulled into one place rather than you have to find where all these different systems are going and logging and capturing their information and all that. So I've even, come around to setting up Systemd timers instead of cron jobs and stuff like that. So yeah, I can understand the caveats and complaints people have with Systemd, but there's a reason why people started adopting it, because especially when you're in business, it makes so much sense. It's so much easier to troubleshoot and dive into logs and not have to go from this and that and correlate all this different information. CS was very theoretical, which is nice, but you still need to teach yourself. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where I think one of the problems is for a lot of the people that come in to the field. And I have a lot of people that, have come into my streams and been like, I have a degree in cybersecurity, but I can't get a cybersecurity job. And I have to burst their bubble and say, you're not going to get hired with that experience. So I'd start out by saying, do you have any experience? Did you do any internships? They're like, no. I'm like, there's your problem. You have to have the experience. Most employers want to have 1 to 3 years of experience at least to get into cybersecurity. And even then, let's say you do happen to be fortunate enough to get a cybersecurity job, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice because as much as people complain about help desk and basic IT support and doing the ticketing and all of that stuff, you learn so many fundamental skills, especially soft skills, at that level. You learn to troubleshoot, you learn to communicate, you learn so many different aspects that I've seen so many different people that have come into cybersecurity and managed to jump past that point and go straight into it, that they just are at a disadvantage. And there's things where it's like, I've met a few people where I'm like, you should go back to service desk and probably spend a year or two there and just get your chops, get your basics, a lot of the soft skills, and go from there. As I tell everyone, you have to embrace the suck for the first year or two, at least. But it gets better. But everyone starts crappy. We all start with the, bitch work, shall we say. But the important thing is to learn those fundamentals and build upon them. But it's getting a little late, guys. Do I use Linux or Windows more? I definitely use Linux more. I only have like one Windows box, the stream box, and I barely touch that except for streams. But it's getting a little late, guys. I do have work tomorrow. So I thank you all for joining me. I will be back on stream tomorrow. And make sure, if you haven't already, follow me on all of my socials. My links are in the bio for all of you. I'm on TikTok, Twitch, Kick, YouTube, and Blue Sky, Mastodon. I have a Discord and a Matrix server as well. Links are all in the bio for all of you. If you don't see them in the chat, I love all of you. Stay safe. If you're on Twitch, stick around for the raid. And happy hacking. See y'all tomorrow.